Hi, Wild Things. As promised, I am back to talk about the Errors of Us situation with some 2020 hindsight. Now that, some time has passed, my perspective has changed, and I obviously feel very differently about things based on, what information has come to light and how things have kind of panned out after the fact. I know I kept kind of alluding to the fact that things had kind of changed for me in a lot of videos. So, I thought I should, make a official kind of like chat, an official sit down of, going through some of those things that have changed with that hindsight, particularly given that, I did bring that to the internet. I kind of feel like a little bit, if you bring stuff to the internet, it's kind of your responsibility to, deal with it on the internet a little bit as well. Like, I kind of feel like that's kind of the vibe. If you do bring stuff up here, I feel like you got to address it here as well, a little bit at least. That's the vibe of the day. I'm going to be talking about Errors of Us and where I was coming from, how I was feeling, and then, how that situation eventually resolved. Because obviously, I was definitely not in the best place I've ever been in during that time. I was definitely panicked about some things, definitely afraid of some things, definitely had a lot of stuff coming up. Was generally not having a good time in that time, which was obviously exacerbated by the context of the situation, given that Cari and I cannot speak still to this day. And so that was definitely making a lot of my anxieties a lot worse than what they needed to be. I just want to clarify where I was at, how I was feeling, and, kind of all the kind of many, kind of pains and pressures that were on me at the time, that I was dealing with, as best possible, considering, I definitely felt very under-resourced, and very in the dark, and just very emotional at the time, had a lot of stuff coming up. So I do want to clarify kind of that situation, given that, I feel like in comparison to what was actually going on at the time, I feel like I put so little on the internet, I just want to provide more context about that situation. And then also the other thing that, my intent with this video is obviously to talk about, how Cari and I moved through and past that, given that, obviously now I think it's pretty apparent that we're pretty good. Again, we're still in a shitty situation, still can't talk, and, it's still not ideal, and, shit's still hard for both of us. I'm sure there's still a lot of smiling on the outside, dying on the inside, on both sides. But at the same time, we have managed to move past that fight at least, or that, miscommunication and that, hard time, I guess. I don't really know what to call it. I think, explaining how we managed to move past that mostly, obviously I think we're going to have some conversations about things, when we do get to talk, and kind of, heal everything that we've been through in the context of this situation, and kind of essentially go back and kind of sort through it all, 600 days of crap. I think it would, do some good to kind of talk about how we moved through and past that, in the sense of maybe providing some context of how we got to where we got to, given that that was the situation during Errors of Us and around, my birthday last year. And also I think that provides valuable context of what this is, you know what I'm saying? It is actually baffling to me that we managed to move through that. And I think it just says a lot, both about, us as individuals on our own healing journeys, but then also about this connection, the fact that, obviously there was enough love here, and it was love in a particular way, a golden way, I would say, that, somehow we got pulled out of that darkness. I definitely think that, how we got through that just says a lot about the kind of love that's here. It's definitely different than any kind of love I've ever experienced before in that sense. It just feels different in terms of how easy, not that it was completely easy as in a breeze, but, I think it's a kind of love that, does feel golden in the sense that, it's so much easier for me to put my ego aside and really see where she's coming from. And yeah, like the love is like way, way, way more important than my ego. She's way, way, way more important than my ego. And I think basically vice versa for her. Like, like both of us obviously didn't react to each other initially all that well in that situation. But I think the speed at which we both turned it around does speak volumes about kind of, the love that's here, that we're both able to kind of like, drop our, fears and anxieties, and like the love was so strong that, it allowed us to do that. Because I think, you kind of have to have a different kind of love to be able to, get through stuff like that, particularly just given the restrictions we're under, like given like that we were not able to speak, like, and we had to find a way around it and find a way to put, like ego stuff aside, and, allow love to be stronger than fear in those situations. Like, like I think you just have to have a different kind of connection to like actually get through that, given, kind of the situation. Like the situation itself, definitely not good. Definitely not, a favorable situation for dealing with things in a healthy way. But somehow I think we're able to do that, like absolutely to the best of our ability, given the restrictions we're under. Like it baffles me that, we did get there, and we did do it in a reasonably healthy way in the end. Like, so I don't know. I just feel like it's a pretty good story in terms of like how we got past that, or at least how I got past it on my side, and what I can kind of tell from Cari's side, or what I'm kind of guessing or assuming based on my best educated guess. Based on the way we were back and forthy at the time. Essentially that's going to be this video. That's what I'm going to talk about. It might turn out to be pretty long because it's going to be lots of kind of stuff to go over. If you want to know like what was going on then, if you want to know the hindsight perspective, and then also know like how we managed to get through that, stick around. So I feel like we need to start with setting the scene. I'm going to paint a picture of some of the main things that Cari was doing to let me know what the original plan was. And then also kind of paint a picture of what was going on in our connection leading up to Eras of Us dropping that, may or may not have contributed to me ending up being blindsided by Eras of Us dropping. So to start off with, for most of 2023, Cari was leaving the most heavy-handed finding rewilding hints like everywhere. Like every opportunity she could find, she would reference like find or wild, usually both together or both in like quick succession. One of the like really big ones early on was when she was in Hawaii, she posted a carousel that was captioned lychee, and then if you scroll to the 8th slide, which is obviously my birth date, the 8th, there was a scene of her, picking lychee from a tree. And if you're familiar with the TV show The Wilds, there's a sapphic couple that has their first time under a lychee tree. And so this kind of slide was very obviously kind of like calling to or referencing that scene. Plus, what's more, she was actually wearing an outfit that was part of her collab with JD Sports. And if you're not familiar, my initials are JD. This slide was very intentional to reference both me and the Wilds. And if you slid the carousel across to the next slide, she'd even cut the next slide down to 12 seconds long, which is obviously my birth month, the 12th. And then she'd also put music on that slide by Tash Sultana, who's an Australian artist. So like she was doing heavy-handed stuff like this the whole time, like very much hinting at like some sort of finding rewilding reveal on the 8th of December. Like it just kept coming up. This was probably the biggest hint that she left, but she would just be doing this sort of stuff constantly. After that, she then announced the Us.NZ tour in Australia using this like pink washed image. She'd like pulled something from The Girl of My Dreams, kind of like photo shoots, and then she'd colored it pink, which is obviously a reference to On Wednesdays We Wear Pink. which also just happened to be the color of her suit when she performed Better Version for MTV. So it was all like very like pink coded. She was going to be in Australia for my birthday over, you know, the 8th or the 12th, which was when I was assuming Finding Rewilding was going to come out originally. I assume it was originally going to come out on my birthday, based on, you know, her being in Australia at the time, her posting this pink washed image, and yeah, her having left very heavy-handed hints that there was something Finding Rewilding related happening on the 8th or the 12th. And after she did that, she did a little bit of Australian media in some of the articles. She talked about, you know, wanting to spend her entire summer here, which is obviously December through to February. So like originally, like it was very clear that the plan was she was dropping an album titled Finding Rewilding. It was dropping on my birthday on the 8th of December. And that, yeah, she was going to be here for all of, you know, our summer, so all of December to January, based on, you know, kind of what she was saying in these interviews. She was talking about spending time here for the summer, and wanting to do a lot of things that, you know, I had mentioned in a few videos that, you know, I wanted to do with her when she was here. So yeah, she was like very much leaving heavy-handed hints that this was the plan. And this was how everything was going to go down. If you want to know some more of the actual details of how I thought that rollout was going to go, you can go back and watch the second video in this like Fletchy series, the Forbidden Lovers video, because I did spell out like what it looked like, the exact kind of like marketing and rollout was going to be. But essentially I thought she was going to drop probably a track in August or September, either on the anniversary of the very first show of hers that I went and watched, or on the anniversary of the very first message she sent me sometime in September. Then I thought she was going to drop Lesbian Crush probably on coming out day in October. And then I thought she was going to drop the entire album on my birthday. But that's not how things ended up going down. And in all fairness, I did have a little something to do with that, because I obviously posted my Forbidden Lovers video on my YouTube, basically exposing the marketing strategy that they had originally devised, which was essentially our artist has been secretly in love with someone and written a whole album of love songs about her, but she's too shy to say anything. Which, you know, like in my defense, I feel like that marketing strategy was useless anyway, because, you know, I'd posted so much, particularly of the ways that Cari and I were like secretly back and forthing with each other, that I just felt like, you know, that marketing strategy was obviously a lie. So, you know, in my defense, I feel like the strategy was also already useless before I said anything. But obviously when I said something, that did provide the perfect opportunity for Cari to use it as leverage to get out of her contract if she so wished. And it turns out that that was what she so wished, apparently, which, you know, like if you've listened to Doing Better, like there is absolutely like no question why, like when that opportunity arose, that she wanted to use that as leverage to get out of her contract, given that, you know, like by me posting that, essentially I was kind of, you know, giving her some bargaining chips through which to negotiate her way out of, you know, her contract. Because obviously it was like exposing like, you know, what her label was up to, and yeah, like things that had kind of made her look not so great in the situation, like things that were like really compromising her integrity in terms of like having to go along with these schemes. So yeah, like I totally understand why she wanted to use that situation as leverage to get out of the contract. And like, you know, I knew that was a very real possibility. Like when I posted that video originally, that might happen. To be honest, I wasn't 100% sure what was going to happen. I knew that was a possibility, but I really didn't know like what they were going to do with that. So like my plan was obviously just to remove myself from the situation, given that I was getting really hurt and it was becoming like quite toxic for me personally. And then also I felt like I was bringing a toxicity into the connection because I was starting to build up a lot of resentment towards Cari, because obviously even though I knew in my logical brain what the situation was and there was like certain restrictions and yada yada, but you know, my lizard brain was definitely not understanding that and tying up a lot of the hurt that I was enduring with Cari, and yeah, just like tying them together, and it was getting like very kind of messy, and I didn't like that, you know, all my pain was like becoming associated with her. And then I was getting even more resentful of her. And at the time as well, like I'd never heard her say anything in terms of like how she felt about me specifically and explicitly. Like, never heard an I love you. Never like knew if she was like in any way sorry for like getting me involved in the situation to begin with against my will. And yeah, just like didn't feel super seen in like the hurt that I was in based on being in the situation and her not being able to talk back to me and all the things that I was bringing up. And like, it was obviously very triggering. Like, I do have quite an anxious attachment and, you know, like I've experienced some stuff in my life in previous relationships, like stonewalling. So, you know, the situation was like extremely emotionally difficult for me. And it was just like hitting so many pressure points, so many trigger points for me. So like, even though I didn't really know how things were going to go down, I just knew that I really needed to remove myself from the situation and take a step back and like, you know, stop communicating with Cari and, yeah, like try and just, you know, drop the situation, put it out of my mind as best possible and try and kind of, yeah, like remove myself to the best of my ability. And, you know, that turned out to be pretty near impossible because, you know, no matter like, how much I tried to remove myself, it did still feel like I had my head in a guillotine that could like come down at any moment. And when I was, you know, trying to remove myself and not look at things, I obviously spent a lot of time off social media. I was aware that I was like possibly like missing stuff in terms of clues of like what would happen, even though at the time I was like pretty sure I knew the trajectory. Like, I also didn't want to not know information and then have something completely shocking happen in my life because I know as an autistic person, that's not good for me. Like, having any sort of shock surprise is never a good time for me. Like, I need to know what's going on. And so like, you know, this feeling of having my head stuck in the guillotine still was like causing me just as much stress. And if anything, I felt like it was causing me more stress, like not knowing when that was going to come down. Like, it could, like the hammer could fall on my head at any moment. And that was like a huge stress in itself. And that was very overwhelming and starting to be debilitating. So I was like, literally no matter what I do, whether I'm in the situation or out of it, like I'm so overwhelmed and this is like so stressful for my nervous system. And it's like having a real toll on, you know, my mental health, emotional health, physical health. So I was just like, I realized when I did try and take a step back, I was like, I'm just like fucked no matter what. Like, this situation is like no win for me. Like, I'm just actually screwed no matter what happens. And so like, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, me trying to take a step back to take care of myself kind of worked, but mostly didn't. And so, you know, like a little bit, it was a bit of a relief when Cari started leaving some heavy-handed hints that she had now, you know, negotiated her way out of her contract with Capitol Records, because that was like, you know, a bit of relief at the time to know that some multi-million-dollar company wasn't going to be exploiting me anymore, or so I thought. And yeah, that at the time I hoped that meant I was going to be treated a little bit differently, maybe a little bit nicer. Like, for example, being able to like talk through some stuff. So yeah, like hearing that definitely warmed me back up to her and made me a lot more hopeful about the situation and more hopeful that her and I would, you know, be able to work out now. Because at the time that, you know, I took a step back, I was like, I'm going to need a healing era. Like, this is so overwhelming for my nervous system. Like, I feel like I'm near breakdown right now. And so I really thought I was going to need like a huge healing era if I was ever going to find my way back to her at the time. So yeah, essentially like what happened after that was like I was a little bit warmer to Cari just based on, you know, the fact that, you know, like I was starting to be able to detangle like the situation from her, particularly because like I think that move, like letting me know that she was, you know, negotiating her way out of the contract, to me showed me that like she didn't want to be in the situation, which I think was something that was like in the back of my mind was a fear, a subconscious fear that she'd chosen the situation. Like, I had a feeling in my heart of hearts that that wasn't the situation. Cari would never do that. Like, she would never, you know, intentionally keep herself away from someone that, you know, she loved as much as she loved me by this point. But yeah, in the back of my mind, I obviously had that subconscious fear. So like her doing that, like telling me that she'd negotiated her way out of the contract and that, you know, essentially I was more important than this like multi-million-dollar company, like that did help a lot. Like, I'm not going to lie, that helped a lot. And helped me let go of a lot of the resentment that I was holding on to and like a lot of the fears that I was holding on to, because I have had more than one person from my past in a power position over me throw me under the bus for the sake of their career. So, like her doing that was like a huge relief, and like definitely positioned her like differently than some of the people in my past that have, done some pretty sketchy shit, to be honest. So yeah, like that definitely warmed me back up to her. But there was still a lot of things that I was carrying around, like still a lot of things that I was hurt by, still a lot of things that I hadn't moved through yet, still a lot of things that I was afraid of, still a lot of things that were making me anxious. And like even though she like kind of fixed the problem, at the end of the day, like I think in that moment, what I really, really, really needed in my heart of hearts was to feel really seen and heard in that moment. And even though Cari like fixed the problem, or fixed the majority of the problem, most of the problem was coming from this like multi-million-dollar company that was scheming a scheme to exploit our connection. At the end of the day, what was more important to me in that moment was actually feeling seen and validated. And I didn't necessarily feel that at the time. So it was kind of like the situation was like half fixed, but like not totally. Essentially at the time I was still like extremely, extremely tender. Like I was definitely like warming back up to her, but there was still a lot going on for me. And I did explain a lot of what was going on for me in my part 3 of my album rollout series, where I was talking specifically about the song Joyride, because that song is basically set when, like all of this was going down. And so obviously a lot of, this kind of fight that we were having, was kind of like ended up on the album, ended up kind of in between the songs attached to You and Joyride. So if you want to know like more details about, this fight and what was going on at the time, and like, all of my subconscious fears, all of Cari's subconscious fears that were being triggered based on, us not being able to talk to each other at the time and just having a lot of stuff come up on both sides, I would definitely recommend going back and watching part 3 of my album rollout series, where I specifically talk about those songs attached to You, Lead Me On, Pretending, and Joyride, because a lot of the details of the situation are in there if you want more context of like this kind of like tussle that we were having. Like that's where I would recommend you go if you want, all the goss. But I think for the purposes of this video, like we can just leave it at that. Essentially, I was like very, very, very tender, after like everything went down around the time that I was posting this Forbidden Lovers video, because obviously, yeah, like just at the time, like I was really, really struggling. And obviously Cari had done some things to make it better, but obviously there was a lot of things that I still needed. And, there was obviously a communication barrier with her and I wasn't really understanding that I don't think was understanding exactly what I was needing. Like I think I thought I was being clear with what I was saying, but I think there was also a lot of things that I was kind of like subconsciously projecting and just assuming that she would know about me, which, in hindsight was a little bit silly. But yeah, like just for the purpose of this video, just know that like after there was that big tussle in the middle of the year last year during Venus retrograde, like, yeah, like some things had been resolved, but a lot of things weren't resolved. So we're like very much in this like, kind of like awkward situation where, like I think we're both still, a little bit, kind of tender. And based on me still being tender, like I wasn't like in full communication with her again, because there was still certain things that I still needed, which at the time I thought I was being pretty clear that I still needed. There was a few things that I think I was like subconsciously expecting her to do for me. Like, for example, I was really expecting her to like be in that kind of like feminine, like see, hear, validate, but like I was not getting that energy from her. And like at the time, like I was making that mean all sorts of things, but I think at the end of the day, her brain just works different. And so, yeah, like there was definitely things like that I was like subconsciously projecting into the situation and like making it mean lots of stuff when I wasn't getting those things that I just assumed she would know how to give me. But then at the same time, like there was also things that I was very consciously aware that I needed, like, to hear some words and to hear maybe, and I'm sorry for like getting you dragged into this situation to begin with, even though I really didn't think it was her fault necessarily. Like it was more that I wanted her to acknowledge the impact, I think, which again is a little bit see, hear, and validate. And yeah, so like, and I thought from where I was standing, it felt like I'd been pretty clear that I still needed those things. And I'm not sure if that was like fully landing with her or not. But, you know, at least on my side, I felt like I was pretty clear on that. And so basically, like, I was still kind of like not fully in it still. Like, I hadn't resumed my normal communication with her because I wasn't totally past it, hadn't totally moved past it. And, you know, I still felt like I needed the space because, yeah, there was still things that were like coming up and hurting me, like particularly with like her not being able to talk back to me. Like, that was super triggering. Like, I really did not enjoy that. And like, it just felt so like it had gotten to the point where it felt triggering to try and communicate with her because I wasn't getting anything back. And so, yeah, like at the time I just felt like I needed to not. And so like I basically didn't communicate with Cari almost at all between, yeah, kind of when I dipped, which was I think August, to right up until the Eras of Us release. So we went months with, you know, no communication outside of any of my occasional like TikTok posts and any of our occasional back and forth like publicly online. Like at the time there was no private back and forthing, which we would normally do a bit of. So yeah, like our communication was like at an all-time minimum. So to set the scene in terms of the lead up to Eras of Us, like we were really not in communication at all. Like we were really not on the same page at all during that time. Like, you know, after that kind of tussle that we'd had just after I released the Forbidden Lovers video and kind of like everything kind of all started to untangle and, you know, things were, yeah, getting lost in translation and like there was a lot of hurt that was like going on that wasn't getting properly, you know, repaired, which, you know, was kind of exacerbating a lot of the hurt. And, you know, there was a lot of story probably on both sides, I'm assuming, like just based on the songs that I've heard from Antidote, it does sound like Cari was getting really triggered as well and stuff from her past was coming up. Like, that was not a good time. That time was not a good time for either of us. I think we were both having a really, really, really hard time at the time. And so leading up to Eras of Us, we're like both having a hard time, not in communication. And yeah, like at the time, like definitely not on the same page about a lot of stuff. In that time, like I really thought the plan wouldn't have changed, like mostly for the fact that like I just thought based on the situation where we were in, where, you know, like we definitely weren't on the same page, we were definitely both getting really hurt. Like from where I was coming from, I was like, we so clearly need to speak. We so clearly like need to repair right now. We so clearly just like need to be around each other to fix this if we have a shot in hell of fixing it. And so I just assumed that like the plan would at minimum not have changed. Like my birthday would still be the end date. And if anything, I was like, surely she would have to like have an exit strategy for sooner rather than later. You know what I'm saying? I was like, hopefully she can pull it up to like October or something. Cause I was like, for me, it just like, I was like definitely panicking at the thought of like having all of this like kind of pain and hurt, like unrepaired and holding on to it for like basically a single day longer than it had to be. At the time, I don't really remember Cari posting anything that led me to believe that, you know, the plan had changed essentially. Like at the time, like everything that she was posting from where I was standing, it kind of seemed like the plan was still the plan. Like she posted when she was at the Maggie Rogers concert and she posted the song Leave the Light On, which is essentially like a song about like hoping that something's gonna, you know, work out. And, you know, like I definitely didn't take that to mean anything other than, you know, she was like hoping we would work out. And, you know, like I was definitely assuming that that meant that everything would still come out on my birthday. Didn't occur to me that it might mean that, you know, I was going to have to leave the light on longer than I had originally thought. Like that definitely did not cross my mind, especially like when she posted that F2 was nearly done. Like at the time, I assumed that F2 was the Finding Rewilding album, which I knew she would have had most of the songs for at the time. What I didn't realize was that the plan had changed and now F2 was going to be the In Search of Antidote album, which she basically had to write like most of in between, you know, me dropping the Forbidden Lovers video and my birthday. Like she was like basically had to write a whole other album in that time. And so like, you know, like based on me not knowing that F2 was now In Search of the Antidote and not the Finding Rewilding album and that was now F3, like I really didn't have anything to go off to like think that the plan would be any different than what it was. From where I was standing, there was no glaringly obvious like clue that the plan was different. Like, I think probably in hindsight, I should have maybe considered like, you know, what Cari might have had to have done to have negotiated her way out of the contract. I didn't really think that hard about it at the time. I just assumed that there was no way that they could possibly drag this out longer than my birthday, given that by that point we'd already spent like almost 500 days apart. And I just assumed that they would want all this to be over as soon as possible, because the longer it drags on, obviously, the less good it is in terms of how they're going to look when everything comes out. Like, you know, like at the time, like, yeah, I really just, like, from where I was standing, I could not comprehend that the plan might have changed. Like, I really thought my birthday was still going to be the end date. So that brings us to how Errors of Us ended up being teased and released. And mind you, like, she started teasing it right before my birthday, within kind of the expected window of time that you would expect someone to start teasing something if they were planning on dropping something on, you know, that particular Friday that happened to be my birthday. So like at face value, it was just like very much giving, oh, the plan's the same. Plus, you know, like I had no real reason to believe that the plan had been changed. Like I had, as far as I know, like I got no heads up. Like I've thought back on it like so many times trying to figure out, was there ever a clue that the plan had changed? And I like cannot for the life of me think of something that happened along the way that was a clear sign that the plan had changed. Plus like when Cari was, you know, teasing F2, the sound that she decided to use was like something Miley Cyrus said about like don't rush or something like that. And so like that TikTok, like that sound that nothing was rushed, and that, you know, she started teasing things around my birthday. I was just like, oh, like she couldn't pull the pin earlier, which was like what I assumed if anything was going to change would happen. I was like, if anything's going to change, it's going to come out earlier. And so, you know, like I feel like I had all the reason in the world to believe that we were following the same timeline, and that, you know, everything was going to come out the way that she'd intended it originally, the way the original plan was supposed to go. The kind of like only thing that I can really think of that, you know, might have a little bit suggested that the plan might not be exactly the same was obviously that she pulled down her Australian tour at the time. So she wasn't in Australia at the time. But, you know, there was no reason for me to believe that she couldn't get on a goddamn plane at this point, because I was like, well, her schedule's wide open. Like, there is absolutely no reason why she can't get on a plane anyway. And yeah, like that was kind of like the only thing that I could really think of that might have in any way indicated that, you know, the plan might have changed, like tours changed, plan might have changed, like kind of fine. Like you could argue that. I did not take it that way. You know what I'm saying? Like from where I was standing, that like definitely wasn't a good enough reason for me to think that the plan had changed. So when it came to the promo, the very first thing that happened was Cari tweeted this tweet, "Girl of my dreams, I fucked it up." And obviously like that made sense in the context of our situation at the time, because obviously in the middle of, you know, that year, in the middle of 2023, we'd had this, you know, like altercation that was like not totally healed and repaired from. Like at this point, like I still hadn't, you know, contacted her since I took a step back, even though, you know, like I was obviously occasionally posting stuff about her publicly on TikTok. Like I'd stopped messaging her. And so like things, and like the videos that I was making like wasn't super like great. You know what I'm saying? Like I was mostly just talking about my experience in terms of like things that were triggering me, signs from the universe that I was seeing. And then, yeah, like there was a lot of, at the time, like I had all my Finding Rewilding videos privated as well. And yeah, I deleted the Finding Rewilding playlist, and I was like also posting about other things on my account. So it was kind of like, we were kind of in a fight still, kind of like, it was like cool, like in the sense of like, you know, I don't think either of us were actively mad at each other, but like there was still like a lot of unrepaired hurt and like distance because of that unrepaired hurt. So like when I saw the tweet, I was just like, that didn't, you know, like that didn't make me think anything other than, oh, she like probably wants to say she's sorry, because like if you remember, like when we were actually, you know, like not cool in Venus retrograde, a lot of that was about, you know, me being hurt and me feeling like I needed an apology. And, you know, there was like a whole video that went along with that where, you know, like, you know, I was upset that, you know, she couldn't say that, first of all, she loved me, and second of all, she was kind of like sorry for dragging me into the situation. So when the very first thing she did was tweet this, girl in my dreams, I fucked it up, you know, it kind of seemed relevant to our situation. So that didn't, you know, set off any like alarm bells that the situation was not what I thought it was going to be. You know what I'm saying? I was like, well, this is consistent with, you know, kind of the situation we're in, and, you know, how this might all go down. Because obviously now I was expecting some sort of different marketing strategy, some sort of different game plan, given that I'd kind of like blown the whistle when it came to my like Forbidden Lovers video. I assumed that they were going to change the exact plan of how things were going to play out. And I was like, this seems like a viable alternative. Then the next day she posted the very first snippet of the song, and she only posted a couple of lines. She only posted, how you doing, where have you been, I've been practicing this moment for, and then cut the sound off. And, you know, like obviously that also didn't raise any red flags for me that, you know, the plan might have changed, because, you know, like there was definitely some things that I was imagining that she would be practicing saying to me for the past, you know, 400 or 500 days, given that we weren't able to speak for all that time. I was like, makes sense that she would write a song that started out with, you know, I've been waiting to talk to you for a long time, because that was literally our situation. So again, like didn't raise any red flags. I was like, well, this is consistent with the situation that we're in. And I was like, you know, maybe it'll be a song about, you know, like I was practicing talking to you for so long, but then you dipped before I got a chance to, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then somehow it would lead into like, oh, I fucked it up. Like I fucked it up before I even said hello. You know what I'm saying? Like that, it made sense. It seemed logical. Even like there was nothing about that situation that raised a red flag that, you know, the situation was different than what I was expecting it to be. The next thing that happened was that Cari uploaded this to her Instagram story with the line, we crashed just as quick as we burned. And again, this did not raise a single red flag. And you want to know why? Because when we had our fight during Venus retrograde last year, what I decided to do during that time was create a playlist titled Crash, filled with sad girl songs that I was obviously listening to wallow in my own misery. And, you know, when I did dip, I also, you know, explicitly said that on TikTok as well. I did say that, you know, her crush had crashed. And so, you know, like, obviously, like, it would make total sense for her to put in a song like we crashed just as quick as we burned, particularly given that during this like whole time that I'd had this Finding Rewilding playlist on my TikTok, I'd had a flaming heart emoji attached to the playlist. So, you know, like crash was relevant, burned was relevant. So, you know, like it just made complete sense to me why that line would be in this song that I was like envisioning happening. And it was just totally like applicable to the situation that we were in. At the time, from where I was standing, it really looked like they'd tossed out the original marketing strategy, which I was happy about, because like I obviously didn't vibe with the fact that it was like a completely made up fabricated situation that, you know, like put us both in a pretty sticky situation where we were both getting really hurt. And yeah, like it seemed like the new strategy was probably centered around, you know, like her saying she was sorry and us making up. Like I thought that could definitely be possible in terms of like the new strategy that they devised, particularly given that, you know, like there was obviously a bit of a paper trail of like where we had fought in the Venus retrograde, and that we'd fought because, you know, she needed to be free essentially, because, you know, the situation she was in was causing us both pain. And, you know, she'd obviously left Easter eggs like her wearing the anarchy belt to a show like after we did have that, you know, like disagreement, that not seeing eye to eye. And anarchy obviously means being free from controlling systems. And she'd also posted lots of butterflies, which is, also a symbol of freedom. So I was like, this is plausible in terms of like how they might be coming at this, that, they might be, playing up this kind of like apology and, like that, the fight that we genuinely had, like that was a genuine fight, like kind of using that for marketing instead of like a fake scenario. From where I was standing, I was like, that is very much a possibility. And that's what it kind of seemed like was happening at the time. Then the next thing that happened really threw a spanner in the works, because the next thing Cari posted to TikTok was this snippet that obviously contained the line, I promised every one of my friends you won't get a lyric again. And that definitely made me panic, like, because obviously with absolutely no context, like all I really had to go off was the fact that everything that she'd leaked so far made perfect sense in terms of our situation. And there was absolutely no red flags going on that, she like wasn't talking about me. You know what I'm saying? So like my very first thought was like, like she's talking about me. She's, maybe been sad since we fought potentially. And her friends are asking her not to write love songs about me and to like not write heartbreak songs about me either, and to just get over it because we've never met. Like that's where my mind immediately went. And, that obviously hurt my feelings and made me sad. That was like a possibility. And yeah, like at the time it definitely didn't occur to me straight away that the song might have been about someone else. Like it did occur to me a little bit down the line after I'd, obviously had my panic, that, that meant that, we weren't going to repair, like she was going to like kind of let it, die essentially, like let that fight be the end of her and I, and that, we would never get our love story essentially. Because yeah, we had that fight. And at this point there was like a lot of, hurt feelings on both sides. And I was kind of like, taking it as, like a bit of like defeat, which, I understood because I was in a pretty defeated place myself. So like, it made sense to me that, she might've been coming from a place of like, this is not going to work now. Like we've hurt each other too much. Like, I got that, like that made sense to me. So that was like obviously my first thought when it came to the lyric. Eventually, after the initial panic, I feel like it was the part of me that still kind of like hoped, still kind of felt that like we were it and we were going to be able to work it out, kind of like, kind of pulled me out of it. Like I was definitely in a bit of like dark and despair, like after I saw that clip, like definitely like panicked, definitely like, sad, and definitely, was just like envisioning the end of her and I before we ever really got to like start essentially. But yeah, I think this like hopeful part of myself that was like, no, I feel like this is gonna work out, even, against all odds. At the time, couldn't see the forest from the trees, could not in my cognitive brain figure out how the fuck we were gonna recover from like everything that we'd been through up until that point. At the same time, there was like some sort of light in me that like felt like this was, the thing, and that, my gut wasn't wrong about her and I, and that we're going to end up together. And I think that kind of like light pulled me through, and, opened up my eyes and was just like, maybe consider this particular lyric that she's leaked is about someone else. And at the time, like, because everything else like fit our situation so well, the only way I could make it make sense in my head was that these were going to be two different songs. And so at this point I was like, oh, this isn't going to be one song. This is going to be the whole Finding Rewilding album. And, most of everything she's leaked so far is going to be about me. And then this one lyric is going to be from a different song about Shannon. And like, I don't know enough about like music composition. But the song sounded different enough to me that I was like, that seems plausible. Like it must be, that she's actually leaking the whole album and just making it sound like it's one song. Because at this point people had started to speculate that it was about Shannon and about the Eras tour. And so I was like, oh, I think she might be leading people to believe that the song's about Shannon, and then she's going to end up dropping the whole Finding Rewilding album, and there's going to be songs about Shannon on there, but there's also going to be songs about me. Like that's that's eventually like after this clip dropped, like that's the place that I got to, and that's what made the most sense to me at the time. And at the time, that was the extent of what I was thinking about the situation. But I look back at this now and I realized that Cari was saying a lot more stuff than I was realizing, because I look back at this clip now and I realized that, you know, had I been thinking a little bit harder about some Taylor Swift like lore and some Taylor Swift like lyrics, and had I remembered a very specific dream that I had that I told Cari about, you know, this clip might have made a lot more sense to me and might have led me to the answer that, you know, I was seeking, the answer that I would eventually come to months later, you know, had I been able to apply that to this particular clip. But, you know, at the time, like it just went completely over my head. Now I understand that this black and white striped shirt calls back to the dream that I had that I told Cari about, which you'll find on my socials if you go looking for it. But essentially the dream was that Cari came to visit me and I lived with Shannon at the time, apparently. And when Cari came to visit me, she had this suitcase of girly stuff. And in the dream, Shannon pushed her onto the suitcase, which, you know, I was taking as a metaphor for Shannon pushing her into a more feminine energy than what's actually natural for her. But then, you know, she came to my room, opened up her suitcase, and like all of the girly stuff in her suitcase was like smashed. And she also had her foundation, which is obviously a kind of makeup used to cover things up, smashed as well, which Cari references on her website by putting a black and white photo from the sex tapes era over the top of this like coded Fletcher sticker to like, yeah, reference this dream and to allude to some, you know, gender queerness, some masculine energy that, you know, is more authentic to her that she didn't get to express fully in her last relationship. I told Cari about the dream when I was still contacting her privately via voice memos. I mentioned that, you know, Shannon was wearing a black and white striped shirt in the dream, the same as she was wearing in the Wasted Youth music video, hence why Cari's wearing a black and white striped shirt in this video when she's, you know, obviously dropping a lyric about Shannon. Other thing this shirt references is a line from the song Daylight that goes, "I used to think love was black and white, but it's golden," which is an extremely significant line from a song in the context of everything that's happening in the Fletchiverse right now. Like this is like probably the fundamental thing that, you know, everything in the Fletchiverse keeps coming back to, because Cari's obviously making a contrast between two muses in like all of her art right now, where she describes one muse as like black and white and the other one like golden like sunshine. And that's also why in this clip she has a gold ring on her left index finger, it looks like, which in witchcraft is the index finger that calls energy in. So calling a golden love in, which she also had on her finger during the Pretending music video as well. So like very much like this clip was foreshadowing a like this like foundational thing that she's been doing for this whole like rollout. That's, you know, essentially bringing everything back to comparing two muses, one being black and white and one being golden. Looking back at this now, like this is absolutely so obviously what she was setting up. Like she was definitely starting to set up that foundation that is currently at the center of the entire Fletchiverse, which is essentially contrasting two muses by comparing one to being black and white and the other to being golden, which is, yeah, again, at the foundation of the entire Fletchiverse, the foundation of all of her art right now. And if you go back and watch my previous videos on this channel, like hopefully it'll make it abundantly clear like how she's doing that, particularly in the tour visuals breakdown and the album rollout videos. Like if you watch those, like you should be caught up on this, you know, foundation that she's been comparing and contrasting this way. I don't think I was in a secure enough place to be receiving it like this though. Like at the time, like there was lots of things I needed. Like I was still like pretty hurt and had a lot of stuff coming up, a lot of stuff that was triggered that, you know, was making things, you know, a lot harder to absorb kind of objectively. Like I was definitely in a lot of story, a lot of narrative and a lot of pain, and, you know, needed a lot of things in order to like move through it. First of all being an apology, and second of all being like some explicit words of like how she felt about me. Like I just really needed to hear the words at this point. Like I was definitely not super secure like absorbing all of this based on, you know, not having those things. And then the other thing that was like also a problem was obviously like my mind didn't go straight to that dream that I'd told her about. And also, like, I didn't know at this point that the song Daylight even existed. You know what I'm saying? Like, let alone remember specific lyrics from it. I was definitely not well versed enough in the Swiftie universe. Like, I've only really gotten into Taylor Swift since Cari crossed my path. And, you know, at this stage, it's like mostly been the later albums. Like, I really like Folklore and Midnights. But, you know, I hadn't really gone back through the rest of her discography. Like, I think I'd listened to like each album like on shuffle like a couple of times, like probably not all the way through because they're like fucking massive. So like I didn't consciously know of the song Daylight. It wasn't until like almost the Antidote drop date that, you know, a clip from like a TikTok with the song Daylight in the background happened to find its way onto my FYP, and I heard the lyrics. I used to think love was black and white, but it's golden. That, you know, everything started clicking, and I realized all the times that Cari had been like making this contrast between black and white and golden. And obviously I immediately made the connection that, you know, obviously the sex tapes era was black and white. I'd seen that Polaroid in black and white, you know, like I'd seen so much stuff that was like making this contrast between black and white and golden. And I could see it all over Cari's feed all of a sudden. She was like, you know, definitely like consistently posting about it. Like she'd made her announcement post before the Antidote album dropped, like all in black and white. Her profile had been black and white since Eras of Us. She changed her like, you know, cover screen on Twitter to black and white. Literally hit me all of a sudden. Like suddenly I got it. I saw it. I saw the vision and I saw it everywhere once I saw it. And like I saw it all the way back to this post. The time that Cari posted this, I had not a clue. Like it was not registering to me for a second. So, you know, like that was just completely over my head, completely lost on me. So at the time I was like very much, you know, in this mindset that, you know, Cari was potentially still dropping the whole album on my birthday, and she was teasing 2 songs that in my head were 2 separate songs, one about Shannon, one about me, and she was making them sound like they were the same song so that people would think that she was dropping one song, but she was actually dropping the album. Like that's really where my head was at after I'd seen all this stuff. And then she started teasing the chorus to Eras of Us, and that made me panic again, because every single line in the song Eras of Us references something to do with Cari and my connection. For example, this entire thing, like this entire flirting backwards and forwards basically started with me commenting King Cari era on one of her Instagram photos and her liking it. Like that was something that happened way, way, way at the start before I'd made a single YouTube video about her, and that essentially started us flirting backwards and forwards, like subtly for a while. And then, you know, like after I did make that YouTube video, Cari obviously responded by making a TikTok saying that she liked me. And it just so happened on the exact same day that she made that TikTok saying that she liked me, Taylor Swift announced the song Snow on the Beach, which is about this like magical moment when you realize 2 people are falling for each other at the exact same time. And so obviously that became our song for a while, even though it was unreleased at the time. And then Taylor obviously announced the Eras tour. And then it just so happened that throughout our entire connection, Taylor Swift songs have literally peppered, like bookmarked, like basically every era, every evolution of our connection, which is why my Snow on the Beach playlist on my Spotify is full of Taylor Swift songs. It's basically bookmarking all the Taylor Swift songs that like marked an era for Cari and I. For example, like there was a time where Glitch was the song, given that I kept logging onto my Spotify and it kept telling me that I was the author of Cari's playlists. Then for a while, King of My Heart was obviously the song of the moment. Then there was a bit where Invisible String was the song of the moment, because I realized that a lot of my old poems and Cari's old songs like coincided. Like I'd written those poems like 6 to 12 months before she'd published songs that were like basically the exact same themes. And then obviously like this continued for the entire like connection that we've been in, all the way up to and past like when Love Story obviously became kind of the song of the moment, given that, you know, like we were in this kind of like Romeo and Juliet dynamic, and that's what that song's all about. So like, you know, literally Taylor Swift has narrated the errors of Cari and I, like for real. And then obviously like the story of Loveline, like I made a whole YouTube video about us being forbidden lovers and it being very Romeo and Juliet, and Romeo and Juliet just so happens to be one of the greatest love stories of all time. Like, you know, that's like very much a Finding Rewilding reference. Then the next line, stealing the air from my lungs, references a line from the song October Passed Me By, which was the song that Cari put on her playlist immediately after we told each other we liked each other. Obviously, we told each other we liked each other in October 2022. And then as soon as that month ended, she added this song, October Passed Me By, to her playlist. And she kept this on her playlist for like well over a year. And in the song, there's a line about the air being stolen from someone's lungs. And there's also a line about making someone your girl. And the thing about that line is that, you know, I had basically deduced that there was going to be a song that had something to do with Cari talking about making someone her girl, particularly after Cari added a cocktail to her drinks menu at her Meet Her at the Bar events in mid last year that was titled Cari's Girl. So I'd kind of put two and two together. I'd sussed that there was going to be a song titled My Girl or something on Finding Rewilding. And then obviously I saw this drinks menu and saw Cari's Girl, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a song called Cari's Girl on it. And I obviously remembered that in the song that inspired that song, there was a line about stealing the air from the lungs. So like when I heard that line, that's immediately what I thought of. The Girl of My Dreams line obviously referenced when Cari sent out promo packages last year, and she covered them in like artwork from my TikTok profile, and then stamped them with JD plus Fletcher equals Girl of My Dreams. Obviously, given that JD is my initials and she is Fletcher, like obviously those promo packages very much looked like she was calling me the girl of her dreams. And then the final line, forever we're young, remember it just the way it was, to me seemed to be referencing something that I said in a TikTok, basically when I was dipping, because I was really triggered in this situation and I was starting to get really hurt and I felt like I was bringing a toxicity into the connection. In that TikTok, I literally said, like, I got a dip because, you know, like up until this point, like this connection has been magical for me and I want to remember it that way forever. Like I verbatim said that, like I want to remember it this way forever. You know what I'm saying? So like every single line in the chorus was just, you know, triggering flashbacks and memories of shit that had happened in our connection. And so when Cari started teasing this Girl of My Dreams, like forever we're young business, like every single, like not a fucking word of this chorus did not apply to us. So obviously that made me panic because I was like, this song definitely seems like it's about me. And the thing about me realizing that this song like seemed like it was about me, at least when I was like first hearing it with no other context whatsoever, near my birthday. And, you know, like at the time that all this stuff was supposed to come out, that was the plan. Like I was freaking out because my first thought was like, you know, obviously I said like, I want to remember it this way forever when I was dipping. And so I was like, oh, like Cari's also dipping. Like Cari's also deciding to like leave this in the past and like not even try and repair this connection with me. That was like my first thought. And so, yeah, obviously that made me panic and upset and hurt and, you know, just like feel a lot of things. But at no point after I just heard the chorus did I consider that this would be talking about someone else. I was just like, everything that she's teased so far fits so perfectly, aside from the I told every one of my friends you won't get a lyric again business. Like everything else like fits this situation to a T. Like I had absolutely no reason to think that this song would not be about me. Then the next thing Cari posted didn't make it any better, because the next thing she posted was this TikTok that was captioned, "Guess this song is about all the girls forever loopy in my mind." And the way that it was like grammatically syntax, like it, to me, it felt too eerily similar to a line from Girls, 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 which, you know, obviously goes girls going wild in my mind, for there to be no correlation. You know what I'm saying? Like as soon as I read the caption, I was like, uh-oh, like I think this is a girls reference. And I couldn't tell if she'd swapped out the going wild to forever looping, to like not say wild, to make it like more of a surprise, but like still close enough, or if she'd subbed in the forever looping to try and make this TikTok about Shannon and I, because obviously at the time I thought this was going to be two separate songs, one about me and one about Shannon. And so to me, it made sense that she would try and reference us both in this one TikTok, pretending it was one song, because at the time that's what I thought she was leading people to believe. In my head, I was like, there's a whole album coming, like everything else other than this one lyric about, I told every one of my friends you won't get a lyric again, like fits my situation, except that one lyric. So I really thought it was going to be two separate songs. So when Cari posted this TikTok, I was like, uh-oh, like this is not looking good for me. To me, it seemed like she was alluding to the fact that, there was going to be a song about me and a song about Shannon, and that this TikTok was her trying to make people believe that it was one song. Obviously, it ended up being one song, but at the time, just based on how well everything else fit me and how this one other lyric was like a bit of a standalone thing, like to me, that's what it seemed like. It did seem like it was two songs that she was trying to lead people to believe was going to be in one song. Then the next thing she did kind of pushed me over the edge, because I'm not going to lie, up until this point, online at least, I was trying to keep it pretty cool. I was just like hoping and praying that like it was not going to be what it looked like it was going to be. And I was just like praying for a miracle. I was praying for like a surprise twist ending, that the song was not going to turn out how it kind of sounded like it was going to go. And so, yeah, like I was kind of keeping it together up until this point. But then when Cari posted this TikTok, I really started to like freak out, because the thing about this TikTok is she'd taken her jade rings off. And the thing was, like, I had almost never seen her without her jade rings ever since she put them on in August. Like basically from August up until this point, like every single clip I'd ever seen her in, every single photo I'd ever seen her in, she had them on. The only time she didn't have them on was during this, when she posted this clip about the, I told every one of my friends you won't get a lyric again clip. So, obviously I made that mean things in my head. I was just like, she doesn't do stuff unintentionally. Like she's trying to tell me that she's taking the jade rings off, as in taking jade off, and that I'm going to be the same as Shannon. I'm going to be a thing of the past. You know what I'm saying? Like that's really where I went when I realized she didn't have her jade rings on. I was like, this does not look good for me. Like this seems to be foreshadowing that the song's going to go exactly how I expect it's going to go. And that, yeah, she's going to basically say goodbye forever to me and to Shannon. She's going to be like, fuck y'all, I'm out. Like, remember, like, whatever dilly-dally we had, like, just the way it was, to me at that point, that's who I thought that song was going to be directed to. And I thought that, like, album was potentially going to, have potentially the Finding Rewilding love songs in it, but then end on this sentiment of like, but I messed it up. Like, we're both too hurt now. We both need to walk away from this situation. Like, that's what I was thinking before the song came out. Like, I was just like, that's what I was expecting. I was like, this does not look good for me. Like, this feels like this is going to be like the end. And I'm going to be real with you, it's after I saw this TikTok that, I started having panic attacks. Like I had never had a panic attack in my life, but I saw this TikTok and I had probably 7 within, 3 or 4 hours. I remember having like at least like 4 back to back. And then I had a few like on either side of it. And it was the first time I'd ever had them before. And like, I'm not going to lie, that really freaked me out. But yeah, like I know why I had them, because, like I was mentally not in a good place when I was like putting 2 and 2 together and like, this is how everything looked. Like, yeah, I was in a pretty dark place. Like to me, kind of what it looked like was that, Cari had potentially like misled me to believe that she was leaving her label, even though she actually wasn't. And, like her posting Butterflies and Anarchy was, to try and mislead me into thinking that she'd left her label to give me a little bit of hope, and that she'd put the jade rings on her index fingers, again, to give me a little bit of hope, so that, she could essentially do the big reveal on my birthday and just like be like, yeah, we've hurt each other too much. We're going to part ways now. and have that be the big marketing. And the thing was, like, you know, based on like everything that I'd seen, and, you know, like her never having spoken to me, and, you know, my past of like, you know, I've definitely entertained the wrong people a lot of the time and thought, like, saw potential in them and saw the best in them when it wasn't actually there. Like, I'm not going to lie, like, that was not helping her situation. That was not helping her case. Like, she hadn't built trust with me. Like, I'd just kind of given it to her. And, you know, like, I was like very apprehensive about the trust that I'd given her based on, you know, her having never spoken to me to like actually, you know, build that trust herself. Like, I was kind of giving it to her blind. And the thing was, like, my past, like, based on my past, like, I really didn't trust people, you know what I'm saying? Like, I kind of gave her a trust that I didn't really have. So, like, when all of this was going down and it looked the way it looked, like, I really thought to myself that I'd given my trust to the wrong person again. Like, that's where my mind went. And that I was going to get hurt the same way that I'd been hurt all the other times that I'd been, like, used and abused by people that I'd seen potential in that wasn't actually there. And essentially that's been the really hard thing about the situation with Cari and I. Like, the way I see relationships is it's like a bank balance that you like constantly make deposits into, but then you also make withdrawals from when you need things. The thing was with the me and Cari situation is that, you know, like, I felt like I was making a lot of deposits and not able to make any withdrawals, but it felt like that, you know, Cari was making so many withdrawals and no deposits. You know what I'm saying? Like, it has felt like very imbalanced in that way. And in that moment, like, I was really, really, really feeling the effects of that, of her not being able to make any deposits and making huge withdrawals, and me making heaps of deposits and not being able to make withdrawals when I need it. Like, not being able to, like, you know, ask for anything from her, really. Like, you know, there was a few things that I asked and she would like let me know subtly, but, you know, like, there's only so much that you can get her to like tell you in codes, like, and that relies on being able to ask the right questions and to like have some context or clue of like what's going on. Like, if you have no clue what's going on, it's so hard to know what to ask. So yeah, like, I really felt the effects of that in that moment. Like, I really felt like I'd distributed my life savings into this bank account. She'd taken it out, but she hadn't made any deposits and there was nothing for me to withdraw. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's been, like, in that moment, that was probably the most intensely that I was feeling that. But yeah, that's definitely been kind of the feeling most of the time with this situation, just based on how it's set up. And that's still kind of true today. Like, I still feel like, you know, I can't make withdrawals when I need them. I do make deposits, which, you know, that's my choice and I accept that I've made that choice. But then at the same time, like, a lot of the time it does feel like, you know, Cari's made a lot of withdrawals, just in terms of like asking a lot from me. And I get that I'm making deposits and I'm, you know, contributing to the situation by staying in it. But yeah, at the same time, like, that's just like hard. Like, that's a weird power imbalance that I don't enjoy. And that is, yeah, like, I feel very unhealthy. Like, it's a very unhealthy situation to set up between two people. Because yeah, like, my choices don't look good. Like, either I make 0 deposits, which, you know, also kills me in a different way, or I make deposits knowing that, you know, she can withdraw and I can't. This is like what I'm talking about when I say that, you know, the situation just feels very lose-lose to me. Like, it just feels like I can't win. Like, you know, it hurts me just as much to like walk away and not make any deposits at all as it hurts me to like make deposits and not be able to make withdrawals, and to like see her making, you know, huge withdrawal, like what to me feels like huge withdrawals that I would love to be able to take. And you know what? Like, I will say that the one like bright side of this being the situation is that I've done this so many times in my life in so many relationships, and like, you know, like, I was aware of it and was like trying to break the pattern because I was like, this is definitely not healthy. But I tell you what, after you've been in this situation and have like seen it done to this extreme and like not been able to like, you know, win essentially, like, the idea of leaving hurts and the idea of staying hurts at the same time, like, just as much. Like, I don't think I will ever do that again. Like, hand on my heart, like, I feel like I actually learned my lesson this time. You know what I'm saying? Like, I realized like how not good this is for me. This pattern that I've been in like my whole life with lots of different relationships where I'm like over depositing and not making any withdrawals, like, and like just depositing so that someone else can make all the withdrawals. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've done that too many times to count. Like, not with all my relationships, but definitely like there was a toxic little few, like a few years ago. Like, I went through a phase where I was, yeah, definitely not with the right people that actually valued like what I had to give, and definitely like weren't interested in giving anything themselves. And I don't know how I got in that loop. Well, I do know how I got in that loop. It's like very much a pattern since I was like very, very, very young. But, you know, it's like, I feel like it's broken now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I will never do that again. I will never be in a relationship where I'm overgiving and under withdrawing. And I'll never be with someone who's over withdrawing and under depositing. Like, I've learned my lesson. I'm healed. I'm a new woman. Like, I never again. Like, never, ever, ever, ever again. And to just keep it 100 with y'all, like, I'm going to be real with you. Like, I have been on the other side before. Like, I have been an over withdrawer in some relationships and, you know, like not making a lot of deposits. So like, I do feel the other side. I feel like that side was a little bit easier for me to heal from. But yeah, like, I've definitely been there too. And I have had my fair share of relationships that have felt more even as well. Like, yeah, like, I've been on all sides of this situation. But, you know, I think the hardest one for me to heal was definitely the over depositing, under withdrawing side. Like, I think the other two, I kind of like, you know, was a bit better with them. Was able to let go of the over withdrawing and under depositing, and was able to, you know, like lean into those relationships where there was more balance. But yeah, like, definitely the over depositing, under withdrawing one, that was the hardest pattern to break. But, you know, I'm telling you, it's broken now. Basically, that was where I was at mentally and emotionally leading up to Errors of Us. Obviously, I was kind of sitting here thinking that, you know, most likely what was going to happen was that Cari was going to like release some sort of song being like, you know, it was good while it lasted. We experienced a lot of magic, but I agree, we've hurt each other too much. Like, I fucked it up. Like, you know, now we've got to leave the past in the past and kind of just remember it the way it was. Like, that's, you know, kind of what I feared was going to happen. But, you know, there was some part of me that like never lost hope, like was fingers and toes crossed that, you know, I'd missed something, I'd misread the situation, something was different than, you know, kind of what I was expecting at this point. And that there was going to be some sort of twist ending, or there'd be some sort of like, you know, something would happen and it wouldn't turn out how it looked like it was going to turn out, especially because it didn't look like she was getting on a plane. I was just like, uh-oh, like, this is not good. Like, this doesn't look good for me. And I was like hoping, based on like how confusing the situation was, that I just missed something. Because again, like, there were things that was kind of like making me think that the song was going to be more about Shannon, but then like everything fit me too well. Like, all the promo fit me too well. So I was like, I feel like that's just wishful thinking. And then, yeah, like, obviously at the time she'd announced that, you know, there was a song called Errors of Us coming out, and she'd hidden Oz in the song card. And so I thought Errors of Us was going to be the song about me for sure. And that, you know, potentially another song was going to surprise drop about Shannon at the same time. And that, yeah, like, I also was like considering that the entire Finding Rewilding album would come out, and maybe that's why she hid Oz in it. And maybe, you know, this song was like gonna say, yeah, I think we've hurt each other too much, let's leave it in the past. But then there was going to be another song on the album after it that's like, actually no, like, I'm getting on a plane now. Like, you know, like, so many scenarios went through my head. Like, there was so many possibilities running through my mind. Like, I really was like, yeah, kind of not taking anything at face value, and just like assuming that Cari had used promo that referenced me for a reason. Like, there was not like, there was only one bit of promo that was not tied to me at all, and that was the "You're Never Getting a Lyric Again." I was just like, that cannot be a coincidence. It cannot be a coincidence that every single bit of promo references me, and it cannot be a coincidence that it's coming out on my birthday. I was just like sitting there like fucking praying for a miracle. Then Errors of Us dropped, and it was just one song. And like, obviously, all I had to go off was the lyrics. And, you know, my very first thought was obviously very much in alignment with what I had been thinking in terms of like Cari taking her jade rings off and like, you know, her potentially waiting for the right moment to like cut me loose so that it's like more dramatic and she can use it for like PR and marketing, which, you know, like, I don't think was like such a wild leap given everything that happened with Becky's So Hot. Like, you know, like I obviously went into this situation just like, you know, in good faith, assuming that she would not do that to me and like that what we had was different. But then also like, particularly when Errors of Us dropped, like, you know, I had this like fear that I'd once again given my trust to the wrong person and like gotten fucked over. Because yeah, I'd trusted someone that I shouldn't have trusted. And it was like more of an issue of like me not trusting myself. You know what I'm saying? Like I had definitely in that moment wasn't trusting that I'd grown and picked better people. I was like really like panicked that I'd done the same thing that I had been trying to heal from for like fucking years since my last relationship. And like, you know, that, you know, like I couldn't trust myself essentially. So like definitely where I went mentally was, yeah, that, you know, like it was very much in alignment with what I'd been thinking leading up to Errors of Us, which was that, yeah, like Cari was just like waiting for the right moment to pull the rug out from under me and that I was wrong to trust her, particularly given that she'd like never said a fucking word to me. Like, you know, based on that alone, like I definitely was very like panicked. I was just like, yeah, I've given my trust to the wrong person. Like, yeah, she was waiting for a dramatic moment to like, you know, like hurt me and, you know, use that for like marketing. And yeah, like I was definitely not in a good place. Like when I first heard the song, I really went fucking through it in that moment. Like at midnight on my birthday. No, I think I like waited until like 2 a.m. But yeah, like at like 2 a.m. on my birthday, like I was really going through it. And like with 2020 hindsight, I look back now and realize that it was just literally all the shit from my past relationship was getting triggered in the circumstance. Like the circumstance was like so ambiguous because I had such little information that, you know, like obviously like when you don't have any information, your mind starts filling in the blanks. Like you start projecting your own story into the situation. And the story based on my past experience was that I trust the wrong people. Like they're looking to hurt me. They're looking to like, you know, wait until they've gotten a lot from me before they, you know, pull the rug out from underneath me and like throw me under the bus. For the sake of like whatever it is that's their goals, which, you know, in my life experience, like that's mostly happened with people that have been in a power position that, you know, had some sort of like, you know, career opportunity presented to them. Like, you know, usually they're like in my life experience, people have pulled the rug out from underneath me or thrown me under the bus to get ahead in their career. Like that's been my life experience. Genuinely more than one person. Like that's happened multiple times for me. And so like obviously in this situation when I had absolutely no context and like, you know, like everything that I'd believed right up until Errors of Us dropped was like not the case. Like, and things were happening that were like totally not to plan and totally unexpected. Like, you know, my mind was just filling in the blanks and, you know, where I went mentally was definitely just like all my past trauma, like all of it like came out like word vomit, like in my head in terms of like, you know, trusting the wrong people, being with people that, you know, throw me under the bus for the sake of their own career. And yeah, like will let me deposit so much into the relationship and they'll withdraw so much and they'll leave me with nothing to like ever withdraw. And it's like very, you know, imbalance. Like that was like very much my life history, my past life experience. So that's all I had to like fill in the blanks with. And so that was what I was projecting into the situation. Like basically all of my worst relationship traumas, like all hitting me in one go. Like every like painful thing that I've ever endured in my life, like it felt like it all hit me in one go, particularly because the situation was so ambiguous that, you know, like it was just wide open to interpretation. And like obviously what I was going to project into the situation was like every life experience I've ever had, which, just happened to all somehow be very similar, and that just seemed to fit the circumstances of the situation a little bit too well for me to not go there mentally. You know what I'm saying? Like that, that, when I say Eras of Us was the darkest time for me, like, I'm not fucking kidding. Like, I literally, like, re-experienced, like, all the trauma from my past in one go. Like, I'm trying not to cry because I literally cried so much at the time. Like, I don't think I've, like, yeah, no one, like, knows yet that, like, exactly what I went through mentally at that time, like, and why I, like, like, really felt like yeeting myself out of the situation for a bit, because, yeah, like, I had an awful day on my birthday, essentially, because of, like, all this trauma that just, like, resurfaced for me, and just, like, yeah, like, all the most painful shit from my past, like, coming back up because of the situation and because it was so ambiguous and I had no fucking clue what was going on. So I was just projecting all my past pain into the situation, and, like, it was literally felt like I was re-traumatizing myself with, like, all of my past pain in that moment. Like, that was, like, yeah, that was, like, an extremely dark, like, week, particularly my birthday, but, like, an extremely dark week. I did not have a good week. I was in an extremely dark place mentally after Eras of Us dropped. And I'm not going to lie, the thing that really did not help the situation was obviously that I'd seen this play before and I didn't like the ending. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd seen this all play out in front of my eyes once before, obviously with a very similar situation between Cari and Shannon. And obviously at the time, as I was watching everything play out, like, my intuition, my gut instinct was that it was all industry BS. It was all, like, promo. It was all a lot of arm twisting in order to be slutty for $1. Like, at the time that I was watching it unfold, I really didn't think that, Cari was the bad guy in the situation. I was looking at the broader context, and thinking that probably had a lot to do with the situation. But in that moment that Eras of Us dropped, like, I definitely, like, in my head went to, like, what if I was wrong? Like, what if my intuition was wrong? What if my gut instincts were wrong? What if I completely misread the situation and Shannon was right the whole time in terms of the narrative that she was in, which, seemed to be very similar to the narrative that I was in at the moment that Eras of Us dropped, around, like, having this, projection of, like, Cari's throwing me under the bus to, like, for the sake of her career. Like, seems like me and Shannon maybe went to the exact same place mentally with, like, what we were projecting into the situation. And in that moment where I was projecting the exact same thing into the situation that she was, apparently, like, I definitely considered that, maybe Shannon was right the whole time. And, like, I'd completely misread the situation. And, like, Cari was all those things that Shannon had kind of accused her of, that, she was the bad guy. She was looking to get ahead. She was, looking to hurt people. Like, I definitely, like, considered it, like, just based on how eerily similar the situations were. Like, I think I would have been crazy not to consider it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I definitely went there, mentally. And, like, yeah, like, that was definitely a very real fear of mine in that moment. And all things considered, it probably would have been very, very easy for me to stay in that place, of, like, kind of making Cari be the bad guy in my story in that situation. And, like, yeah, like, really, like, buy into that narrative that, she'd done everything to hurt me. She was throwing me under the bus for the sake of her career. And yeah, like, that I'd trusted the wrong person and that my intuition was wrong and my gut feeling was wrong. And, yeah, like, once again, I'd, like, picked the wrong person kind of thing. Like, it would have been so easy for me to, like, buy into that narrative and stay in that narrative. I think all things considered, like, given the circumstance, like, honestly, like, I would not have blamed myself for staying there, to be honest. But at the same time, like, like, also, like, I could not shake the gut feeling that, my gut feeling was right. You know what I'm saying? Like, at the same time, I was sitting there and I was just like, I feel like I know that all of those, like, feelings and intuitions that I was having before, like, Eras of Us started to get leaked were actually intuitions and gut feelings. Like, that did feel true. this does feel like I'm in story. This does feel like I'm in narrative. This does feel like I'm in triggered energy. This does feel like I'm in a lot of pain from my past. And so, yeah, like it was definitely dark on my birthday. Like, I'm not going to lie, I had a really bad day. But like, even by the end of that day, I was already starting to kind of like, consider that maybe like my gut feeling was right all along, you know what I'm saying? And like that was like slowly drawing me out of the darkness that I was in, and all of the like resurfacing of pain and all the like triggered kind of emotions, and like, feeling like I was hit with a wave of like every pain from my past, like, and experiencing it again as if it's, happening now. Like, that was a fucking like day. And I think like outside of just, like having a feeling that, I was right the first time, like just, having this knowing of like what feels true and what feels, like, story and being triggered and blah, 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 blah. Like other than that, like other than being like aware of that and having done a lot of like work to be able to recognize the difference between intuition and, like anxieties and things, and like stories and whatever, like the other thing I think that got me out of it was, like that there was also like part of it that I think was like me loving Cari so much that, I was also just desperate to see her side and understand her side. And I think that was also pulling me out of it, like trying to understand where she was coming from. Because, like I really couldn't sit in her being the bad guy for even a day before I was like looking to like try and see her side, because, that killed me in itself to like try and think of her as the bad guy in my story. Like, yeah, like I literally could not do it. I could not stay in that narrative for more than a day, because, I just did not feel that way about her. Like I just did not see her that way. And so, yeah, I think like also me loving her and me seeing her as good, like that was also pulling me out of it, because I was like, like I believe in her, and I believe in her goodness. And, like that power was too strong to keep me in that narrative of like, she's the bad guy. So yeah, like I feel like as much as I was like kind of trusting myself and trusting my gut instincts, at the same time, like also there was some sort of like love and trust in her at the same time that was also pulling me out of it. I'm not going to lie, that was happening slowly as shit. Like I was very, very, very slowly like creeping out of this, because at the end of the day, like I was so insanely hurt in the situation, not only because like obviously a lot of it was obviously like getting triggered and having a lot of stuff from the past come up. Like obviously there was a lot of past pain that was like coloring like, how I was feeling and, like the meaning that I was making out of the situation. But at the same time, like even when I put all that aside, like the objective situation was that I'd walked into something completely blindsided, and like, there was like this perfect storm of situation created for me to become insanely hurt, and to like not get a heads up, and to essentially just walk in completely blindsided and just get like super, super, super hurt. That was still the objective situation, regardless of whether I was bringing past pain into it and bringing narrative into it or not. I was still insanely hurt, by, being allowed to walk into that situation completely blindsided with no heads up, no communication, no, like nothing preparing me, no warning. And, what definitely at the time felt like, like I wasn't having my emotional world and like mental well-being considered before like being allowed to walk into that situation. So like I was still like, aside from all the stuff that I could see was like my stuff, I was still like incredibly hurt in the situation. And so that was taking me a while to process as well. And yeah, like it did take me a long time to crawl out of that dark hole, let me tell you that. And before I move on, before I explain the process of like coming out of that place and, into the place that I'm in now, like I do want to disclaim that, I am telling the story from my perspective and like what was going on for me. And obviously, right now in the story, I don't imagine that Cari looks super, super, super good. But yeah, like at the same time, like, while I don't want to take away from the fact that, like, obviously she made some choices that directly impacted me and led to me being hurt, at the same time, like, I think she's just as much of a victim of the situation as I am, in, most senses. And I think, like, just as much as I've been through this sort of stuff in this situation, like, I think she has too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think there's been lots of times in this situation where she's been just as triggered as what I'm describing. I'm pretty sure, like, the songs like Crush, Pretending, Joyride, Lead Me On, were all written essentially from a triggered place that was like probably very similar to like what I'm describing here in terms of my darkest time. Like, I really think, she's probably had a couple of really dark times in this like situation, that's really triggered her, and, been just as bad on her side, probably through things that, like I have not understood have impacted her, or even if I was understanding that, my actions might impact her, like not able to engage in repair with her. Like, yeah, like obviously when I dipped, I knew that would be insanely hard for her, because she does have, like she does seem to have some issues with abandonment, and like no matter how much I was in her DMs before I did that saying like if I go it is because it's life and death for me, yeah, like I understand if that wasn't landing for her and she ended up in a dark place. You know what I'm saying? Like, the situation has not been good for her either, has not been good for her mental and emotional well-being. And I'm sure she's been in just as dark and triggered places as I have been in this connection, based on the outside circumstances through which, I definitely didn't consent to and I have no control over. But, I really don't think that she has a whole lot more, kind of control and or like consent either. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's very kind of like a coerced situation in her case. And so, yeah, like I just want to disclaim that before I move on. I just thought it was important to check in because, like I think it's just important to remind everyone that this situation has been just as hard on both of us. There's been just as much like pain, triggering, heartbreak, on both sides. And while at the same time, like obviously in this connection, we've experienced a lot of like crazy like growth, healing and magic, like more than I could possibly describe. Like at the same time, this situation has had it all. It's been all like every scrap of like what you could imagine from the human experience has been in this experience for both of us. It's been insane. And in no way am I trying to make her out to be the bad guy, because she is absolutely not the bad guy in this situation. Late stage capitalism is the bad guy in this situation, is the reason why we're all here in this like crazy scenario that, frankly shouldn't exist. Like two humans should not be put in a situation where they cannot communicate when they are this deeply like attached and connected to each other, and obviously going to have some bearing on each other's like world. What we do like affects each other. Like what we do in the world affects each other. That's just the reality of the situation of being connected as a human being in love. Like that's what happens. And like unfortunately we're trying to do that in a very unsafe situation, in a situation that's not set up for us to succeed. I don't know how we've, managed to do as well in this situation as what we have, to be honest. Like, I think it just is a testament to how much we love each other and how much, on our own personal healing journeys, like we have healed. Because yeah, like I just think two people in this situation, like shouldn't survive this. You know what I'm saying? Just like objectively, the way the situation's set up, it's set up in a completely dangerous fashion. And yeah, like I completely morally disagree with it existing. Like I don't think it should exist, the situation that we're in, but we're in it, and this is the reality of the situation. And I'm here like telling my story, doing my best to like speak about, like all the like highs and lows of like what this situation has created, and like what it's brought up for me. But yeah, like don't go looking for a villain, because there isn't one, at least not in this connection, like not with her and I. So yeah, like I just wanted to, do a little pulse check before we continue, before I start talking about how I came out the other side. Just to remind everyone that we are both humans. We were both struggling this whole time. It wasn't one person doing something to someone else. It was like, unfortunately, a like very shitty situation that was, you know, two humans that loved each other were trying to navigate. But anyway, back to the story. Essentially, like what hit me first was just the hurt. Like just as soon as I heard the song, I was just like overwhelmingly hurt, like so hurt to the point where, you know, like I don't think I necessarily had any thoughts or room for any story at all. And yeah, pretty much as soon as I heard the song, probably within an hour, I sent Cari a message and yeah, basically said, this really fucking hurt. And yeah, like I was like, yeah, essentially I was like, I'm really hurt. And I think the other thing I said was, something about, I'm really hurt. And, oh yeah, like basically was like, I miss, reading everything. Was everything like all like a lie, essentially? Like that was the gist of the message. It was kind of like mostly those two things, because that's kind of the feeling that I was in. And yeah, like, and no, the third thing was also like, what did I do to deserve this? Like, especially like with no heads up, like those were kind of the three things that I remember initially messaging her. And I like sent her that one message like pretty much straight after I heard the song. And then yeah, like ghosted. I put all my accounts on private. And yeah, like it wasn't until the next day when I woke up on my birthday, that all the fucking like stories really started. And I was just like super depressed all day. I like cried all day pretty much. It was raining. I went for a walk in the rain. That was nice. That was very like mood appropriate. And yeah, I was definitely in story the next day and like thinking all those things. But then, yeah, by the end of the day, I was like, trying to understand, like a little bit, like just trying to understand in general, because I was like so blindsided, and then also like trying to see it from her perspective a little bit like that was at the start, I was doing that resentfully, you know what I'm saying? Like I like wanted to see it from her side, but at the same time, like I was kind of wishing that I didn't want to see it from her side, and I could just, you know, like be so like hurt and upset that I could just finally let it go, and be free from like having this, you know, thing like kind of controlling such a big portion of my life, like dictating so much of my life and dictating so much of my mental and emotional well-being. Because genuinely it was like, oh well, it has been so awful to have this like kind of entity outside of myself like dictating so much of my mental and emotional well-being. Like I've never been in this position before where, you know, something like that has been, you know, controlling so much of my well-being, like particularly against my will. Like, and that's what's made this whole situation hard, because like I can deal with learning lots of lessons when I've put myself like willingly into a situation, but when I've not consented and been thrown into a situation against my will, and then like I'm getting dragged through the mud like in more ways than one, like that's been really, really hard. It's been so much harder to accept the reality because I didn't put myself in this situation. Like I got dragged into it. Like that's been really hard. And yeah, obviously the other thing that's been really hard is like having this outside entity that kind of dragged me in it to begin with, like dictating so much of my mental and emotional well-being, you know, without my consent or control. Like I just had absolutely no control over the situation. I was just like, yeah, thrown into it against my will. And like, to be honest, like on the bright side, at least I've been able to complain. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know like it's falling on deaf ears and like no one's giving a fuck and like doing anything about it. But, at least I've been able to complain heavily about how much I've like hated the situation. I like see how if you're like an artist, like actually signed to a label and like this sort of stuff is happening in your life where, you know, they are having a huge say about shit that directly affects your personal life. And yeah, like kind of twisting your arm with shit. Like that fucking sucks, because like essentially you got to be out here like pretending you're like really happy, but like you essentially like lose your ability to complain, which I'm just like, how do you cope with the situation if you can't complain about the situation? Like you have to kind of take it on the chin and like accept that it's part of the job description. It's part of the reality, which, you know, like, I feel like sometimes like these big industries like kind of peddle that, but I don't think that's true. Like, I think they make it part of the job and it doesn't necessarily need to be part of the job. And yeah, like I think it would just suck to be in the exact same position as me, but to not be able to complain and just have to pretend everything's fine and not be able to say anything about it, and, you know, be smiling on the outside, dying on the inside. You know what I'm saying? Like, that would fucking suck. Like, it's really no wonder to me that as Cari's been Easter egging, leaving her current label, she's like been doing that by like, you know, essentially using some very heavy-handed hints that, you know, she's taking control back of her life. Like, obviously the song Doing Better is like one of the bigger Easter eggs that she's going to be leaving. And in the song, she talks about her tummy hurting, which is an area of the body that tends to hurt when you don't feel in control of your life, given that it's associated with the solar plexus chakra. And, you know, like, she's also said that in like describing dreams that, you know, she doesn't feel in control of her life, or hadn't felt in control of her life. And, you know, some of the antidote promo, she's like made a specific point that, you know, from now on in her music career, she's going to be taking control of her life. Like, yeah, just based on being in this situation, like kind of with her and going through it with her and like at least being able to fucking complain about it. Like, I totally get why, you know, she's like, yeah, definitely like leaving these heavy-handed hints that she's, you know, taking control back of her life as she Easter eggs that she's leaving. Like, it fucking sucks to like not have any control over the situation. Like, it is genuinely the worst. Yeah, like, I don't know how she's done it for longer than I've been doing it. Like, I've been doing this for 600 days, basically 500-ish days, 500 to 600 days. And I fucking hate it. Like, every day I wake up and I'm like, I cannot do this for another fucking day. But, you know, she was doing it for a long time before I came on the scene. Like, I'm sure it was just as bad, like, for however long she's been, you know, in this industry, and these industries have been operating this way. Like, you know, I think it's particularly gotten worse since, you know, TikTok was around. But yeah, like, I'm sure it's been a flavor of the same the whole time. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, like, I definitely, like, in this experience, empathize with her a lot in terms of like, you know, the toll that takes on you, like having this outside entity dictating so much of your fucking life. Like, it's just like, can you just let me live? Like, honestly. But anyway, I'm getting down a tangent. I need to get back on track with the story. Essentially, for the week after, I was really in this place of like, you know, like, obviously in a lot of pain and story, particularly from stuff coming up from my past, like just being generally hurt in the situation, that I'm like trying to like process and like move through. And then also like, you know, kind of resentfully trying to see it from Cari's side. Like, you know, like like there was some sort of like gut feeling within me that, you know, she was still the one, and that, you know, I was right all along, and all these feelings that I'd had all along were like, you know, genuine intuitions, and like everything that I was in post the errors of us dropping, yeah, like was all kind of like pain and heartache, but, you know, everything that I'd felt up until that point was like real. So yeah, like I was kind of like finding my way back to that. Obviously it was a process. I wasn't like there very quickly. And then also from that place, like trying to see it from her side. Meanwhile, kind of like, you know, kind of like at the same time, like there was a part of me that was just so hurt that like wished that, you know, that wasn't the case. Wished I didn't have the gut instincts that I had about the situation. Wished that I actually was wrong. That, you know, like, you know, those fears that kind of came up in my mind, like I wished they were true, for a bit, because I was just like, at this point, I was just like, I have nothing left in the tank. Like, I cannot keep doing this for another day. Like, I cannot survive another day with my nervous system being so hyperactive from like being stuck in this situation, particularly against my will. That, yeah, there was part of me that just wished that I was wrong, and wished that I, you know, could like just wallow in my hurt so much that I could let it go. But, you know, deep down I knew that wasn't the situation. And, you know, unfortunately that feeling was strong enough that, yeah, it kind of like carried me through to like, yeah, eventually kind of like come out the other side. Meanwhile, like, obviously I'm pretty off socials at this point. Like, I'm kind of like gone ghost. And like, while I'd kind of ghosted again off social media. Cari was obviously posting some things in response to the message that I sent her after I listened to Eras of Us. The very first thing she posted was like a clip of the film clip, which, like I had kind of gathered before I watched it that she was like really wanting me to watch, which, once I watched it, I realized why. But yeah, this first clip that she posted, she obviously left a line from the chorus that, I think she knew that I would know was, a reference to something with Us. The stealing the air out of my lungs line was obviously a reference to October passed me by. To me, like that being like basically the first thing that she posted after I sent her that message, to me was very much giving like, no, I'm still going to make you Cari's girl. Like, you're still my world, etc., like all the sentiments of that song. Like, it wasn't all a lie, essentially. But yeah, like, like that was kind of like how I took that. And then the next thing she posted was she was talking about how she'd accidentally used the clean version of Eras of Us as the sound, which, I don't think was an accident at all, given that obviously clean was on her playlist at the time. Like I think that was very intentional to just like try and soothe my fear, like all of my fears that I'd expressed in that message, and try and tell me that, no, this is like the clean version, like this is me letting my last relationship go, etc., etc. And then the next thing that she posted after that, obviously she posted this kind of like little TikTok where she was, doing, Eras of Us stuff. But the next thing that she posted after that was this TikTok where she'd used a sound from Bags that, she'd cut to start at, "Can you see me? I'm waiting for the right time." Again, like trying to tell me that, yeah, like the plan had changed. And to be fair, like a little bit too late. Like, why too little too late? Couldn't I have heard that maybe before the song dropped? But yeah, anyway, she posted this TikTok being like, "Can't you see me? I'm waiting for the right time," to let me know that, she was obviously waiting for the right time to like make me her girl. But I wasn't seeing any of these TikToks at this point because I'd obviously gone ghost. So I didn't know that she was, referencing like October passed me by. I didn't know that she was like calling like Eras of Us like a clean song. I didn't know that she was, trying to tell me that this was just not the right time and that she was waiting for the right time. The first thing that I saw was actually the next TikTok after that, which is another clip from the Eras of Us music video. And it just so happened that in this clip, there was kind of like two things that immediately kind of like caught my attention. The first being that she's standing in front of a train, and the second thing being that, there's espresso martinis in the TikTok, viewed in the TikTok. And, those obviously caught my attention because we obviously have some Paris train and espresso martini lore. If you've watched the first part of this video, like I've explained where those two things come from in the Finding Rewilding lore. So as soon as I saw this video, like my spidey senses pricked up and I was like, oh, there's things about me in the music video, I realized. And then like I obviously went and looked on her page and like saw all the other TikToks that she'd posted before she'd posted that one, and was kind of like seeing what she was saying. And like it wasn't, those TikToks weren't necessarily fully landing with me. But yeah, like I was kind of like considering watching the music video. At this point, I was like still a little bit too hurt, to be honest. So I was just like, I don't think I want to watch it. I think it's going to hurt me too much, and I kind of don't want to listen to the song again. And so, yeah, I like kind of ignored it for a little bit, but then I noticed that a few people like from like kind of her circles that I was still following, reposted this same like clip, this Paris train and espresso martini clip, like either onto their story or they'd like posted it. I think I saw one on TikTok. And yeah, like then I was like, okay, I think they're really trying to get me to watch the music video, essentially, to like make sure that I see it. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch it. And the final thing that happened that kind of made me bite the bullet and be like, okay, I'm going to watch it right now, was I ended up going and checking her Instagram, which I hadn't checked since it dropped. And I saw that of all the Errors of Us content that she could have pinned to her profile, she decided to pin the Paris Train Espresso Martini clip. And so, you know, when I saw that and she'd pinned it to her profile, even though the other Errors of Us video I could see had done better in terms of numbers, at the time, like, I think, you know, like it had done, you know, like double the numbers. Yeah, I was like, okay, like I am getting the feeling that there's going to be stuff about me in the music video. And at the time I was just like, I just want to know what it is more so than anything else. Like, I'm not going into this like thinking that it's going to necessarily change my mind about things. And I was a little bit afraid of like, you know, what that might make me think if I went and watched the music video and there's lots of stuff about me in the music video, given that the song dropped on my birthday. I was like a little bit nervous that the song potentially, she might have been trying to say that the song was about me, given like everything that happened in the promo. Like at this point, like I was like kind of cool with the song being about Shannon, you know what I'm saying? So like I was actually a little bit nervous to watch it. And I was like, but at the same time, I was like, well, if she's, you know, referencing me in the music video, I need to know what she's saying at the same time. So anyway, I went and watched the music video, and, you know, you can basically see all the things that I picked out from the music video in the first part of this video. I could just, immediately upon watching it, like see all these things that she was referencing to do with me. And, you know, like she'd obviously hired a muse that looked, you know, like probably more like me than like Shannon. But yeah, like maybe a mix if you wanted to argue that. And then, like obviously she'd hid a whole bunch of stuff in there, like the train thing, the espresso martinis thing, like it was very much like the music video was very me coded. And at the time, like, I'm not going to lie, like really didn't know how to take that. Because I was just like, there was just so many possibilities of what that could mean, just like floating through my head. Because again, at this point, I had no fucking context. The only context I had was that she'd released the song on my birthday, and everything she'd done for the promo up until the release of the song was like stuff that could be tied to me, apart from like one single thing. That was like definitely what was like freaking me out the most. Essentially, like by the time I watched the music video, like there were so many possibilities of what could be going on running through my head. And I think it took me like a week to watch the music video. And so that's when I started, you know, thinking about like really what I needed to say to Cari in terms of like, how do I just like make my mind right now a safer place? I'm just like, because at this point, like all the things that were running through my head were like feeling so heavy, so toxic, like they were kind of like eating me alive from the inside. And I was like, I have to do something anyway. Like at this point, like I can't just kind of like, you know, like I can't do nothing right now. Like I'm getting eaten alive by all these feelings. So I was like, you know, like I watched the video and then I was like, okay, I need to like kind of construct like what I need to say. And it took me a few days, like, and I was like thinking about it a lot over multiple days of like really like how I was feeling and what I was thinking, and like trying to reduce it into the highlights of like, what stuff do I need to address to kind of like help with how I feel right now. And so then I very slowly like basically like typed up like, you know, all my thoughts and feelings, and like went back and edited it a few times to like take some stuff out and put other things in based on, you know, like what I thought was important in terms of, you know, I wanted to bring certain things up that, you know, I thought she could either confirm or deny on her end, like somehow. Like, and, you know, like I wanted to bring up some of the things that were like really, really, really hurting me, and like really, really like, like getting heavy and hard for me to hold on to, and things that I felt like I needed to process, while also being mindful of like not everything that did feel heavy that I was holding on to felt like it could be shared either. You know what I'm saying? Like I was trying to like find the balance of like, you know, what's really important for me to get off my chest right now to like find some relief in the situation, while also like, just like not, like being mindful about what I do say, and how I say it as best possible, given that I was like not in a good place. And I was just like, you know, really not in the best place to try and word this well, to be honest, because I'm just like so overwhelmed. It was like a bit of a mess of like trying to figure out what to say. That took me a while. At the same time, like I had to consider that like whatever I said, like that could have very well been the last thing that I said to her. You know what I'm saying? Like at this point, like, you know, like while I had this feeling that I really was, you know, wanting to fight, even if I was having a hard time fighting it, in terms of like, you know, like this feeling that, you know, it's us and it's all going to work out, and this is, you know, like just a really shitty situation where I have absolutely no context. So like all my demons are like, you know, coming out right now, and I'm just like very, very much in pain and very triggered. Like, yeah, like I was in this place, and yeah, like, you know, like hoped that I would get out of it. But at the same time, I was like, had to consider the possibility that, you know, I like might be wrong. Like at this point, like I could not see the forest from the trees really. And, I was just like, I think one of the hardest things about this whole situation is that I've had this feeling of clarity with her. Like I look at her and I can see like everything. I can see my whole future, and I feel so like calm and certain. But the objective reality that I've been in this whole time has been like very contradictory to that feeling. I'm just like, I should not feel this way given the circumstances. And that's what has made this like situation really hard, and like why I've like wanted clarity. I'm just like, I just want my reality to line up with this feeling. You know what I'm saying? Like I am so sick of this, you know, reality that I'm living in, like not reflecting this like peace and calm that I feel. Like it's definitely like kind of making me crazy. Like it's definitely like making me a little bit cuckoo to like, you know, be in an objective reality that's just essentially so fucked. Like just like, you know, not good in terms of making me feel safe, not good in terms of like, you know, like just trying to be a human and existing, and like, you know, having my mental and emotional well-being like just have such a huge toll on it. I'm just like, I should not feel the way that I feel given the circumstances. Like it just does not make sense. And so it's like definitely why, you know, like I've wanted everything to come out, because I'm just like this limbo, this like holding these two realities that just like seem so contradictory and just like seem like they should be negating each other. Like I just need this weird limbo to end, because it's, yeah, just taking a huge toll on my psyche, to be honest. Because the situation was, you know, taking such a toll on my psyche, on my mental and emotional well-being, like, you know, I had to consider the possibility that, you know, like even though I felt all these feelings and felt this kind of like sense of peace and calm and clear with her, that, you know, like I might have to still walk away from the situation, because the situation was just like, yeah, so fucked and just like actually killing me. I was like waking up every day like, how am I going to survive another day of this, because my nervous system is fucking shot. Like by this point I'm like, you know, my like main like stress response is I usually flight or freeze, and at this point like I was so intensely in my flight response that obviously I was having kind of thoughts of like yeeting myself out of here. And also like for me to just try and regulate my nervous system, it was like becoming a full-time job. Like if I didn't go for a walk for like 2 hours every single day by this point, like my flight response would be so activated that, you know, like I just was ending up in really, really dark places mentally. I was just like, for my body to feel safe, for my body to work through how activated my nervous system is right now, for me to like try and calm down from the complete like stress response that I'm having, I have to like walk and trick my body that I've moved 2 hours away from, you know, this stressful situation that I perceive myself to be in, for me to like have even a fucking shot at being halfway calm throughout the day. You know what I'm saying? Like the situation, I was just like, this objective situation is like so not good. And like, I was just like, even if I like work through all my mental stuff to do with like, why did she do whatever? And like, you know, why are we in this situation? And like, even if I like mentally move through all that stuff and like get some sort of clarity and like find some sort of like, you know, satisfactory resolution in terms of like understanding the situation more, the objective reality that I'm in is like so overwhelming to the point where like I really don't think I can cope. Like I'm so under-resourced right now, and like, you know, I was just like, I might just have to yeet myself out of the situation just for the sake of saving myself. You know what I'm saying? Like it was really getting to that point. It was like definitely like getting life and death again. actually way more intensely this time. And so I was just like, like there's a very good chance that I'm going to have to, find a way out of this situation just to save myself. So this very, like what I end up saying to her could very well be the very last thing that I say to her. So like knowing that this could be the very last thing that I would end up saying to her, like I also had to consider that like like while I was obviously trying to, not say, like just be mindful about what I was saying and like what I was choosing to bring up. At the same time, like I also have to say the things that I think I need to say, that if I do have to like walk out of this situation, and possibly like delete all my social media like for good and, like become completely uncontactable so that I can feel, like free of this situation, and, like hopefully save myself in this situation. Like if I have to do that, I also need to like make sure that whatever I say like feels satisfying enough that I can do that and like commit. And like, like if I walk away, I walk away and it's like, like completely like cord cut, like absolutely never being contactable, like never, like not in the sphere of this sort of like world, like absolutely unreachable by the music industry essentially. Like, I had to consider like, that I might need to say some things so that I could do that and like have a really clean break, because I know for me personally I need really clean breaks with things. So I was just like, also while trying to be mindful of what I said, at the same time I'm like, also girly, I kind of got to say what I got to say, you know what I'm saying, just in case I do need to walk away. And yeah, like this, yeah, very well might be the last thing I ever say. So I've also got to kind of say it. Like I also can't be holding on to stuff, particularly stuff that I thought might kind of keep me like ruminating on the situation and might keep me kind of like, yeah, not able to walk away essentially. Like when I was like considering like everything that I needed to say, there was a lot going through my head in terms of like, what the situation was and what I needed to get out of it. Obviously, like where I ended up in terms of like deciding what I needed to say was, everything that was in the first part of this video. Like everything that I said towards the end of that video was like all the stuff that I felt like I needed to get off my chest, in order to, like have some sort of shot at like being okay, like first of all just with my own feelings, and then second of all like, everything that I felt like I needed to say so that, I could, or most of the things that I felt like I needed to say, so that, like if I did need to walk away, I would have felt like, I left it on, the note that I needed to leave it on so that I could do that to the best of my ability. Like obviously there was a few things that I left out because I was just like, I just don't think I can go there on the internet. But yeah, like where I ended up with all this was essentially how the first part of that video ended up. And obviously with 2020 hindsight, like I would go back and like say some things differently, I'm sure. Like I haven't rewatched it. I just kind of like vaguely remember what I said, and the main points that I brought up, because I remember like what things were like really sticky for me and like really causing me a lot of distress, and like the things that I felt like I needed to bring up. And yeah, like I'm sure if I watched it again, I would say things differently. But yeah, like that, where I kind of got to in that video was like all the things that, like I just felt like I needed to say for me. Essentially the things that I remember feeling really, really sticky for me at this point and feeling like I needed like kind of clarity and context on was first and foremost like the intent with the song. Because like up until this point, I didn't really have, any strong enough kind of clues to, let me know what the intent with the song was, what the true intent was. And, like, even though she was like kind of like positioning it as a clean song about Shannon, I was just like, I wasn't sure if it was also supposed to be a clean song about me at the same time, because, obviously everything that she did in the promo leading up to the song was like very much giving like me coded. I watched the music video, which she seemed really intent on me seeing. And again, that was really me coded. Like the muse looked a lot like me. And so obviously I was in definitely a panicked place of like, like what if I'm the Trojan horse muse, given that, she was also talking a lot about Taylor Swift, who famously Trojan horses her muses. I was just like, like from where I'm standing right now with absolutely no context, and the fact that, she released this on my birthday and like had all this stuff to do with me in the song, and, you know, kind of objectively actually very little about Shannon, really, that was like purely about her, at least. Like, yeah, I was definitely panicked that, you know, like what she meant with the song, and if she meant for me to know that, you know, the song was like secretly about me. Like, I didn't know if, you know, I'd misread like all the signs that she was leaving her label and she actually wasn't, particularly because I could see Capitol Records on the like credit of the song. I was just like, I'm worried that I like misread all of that and that never meant what I thought it meant. And she's staying with Capitol Records and she's just gonna like do what Taylor Swift does and like cover up, you know, all of her songs are about Carly Kloss by pretending they're about other people. I was like, from where I was standing with absolutely no context, like it very much looked like that could have been the case, that Cari was going to like pretend to be, you know, not over Shannon, and so that she can continue to write songs about her. And, you know, like the one lyric that wasn't about me, being, you know, I promised you wouldn't get another lyric, but goddamn, here I am, was like definitely kind of like leaning into this theory that I was having in my head that, you know, potentially, you know, that God damn it, here I am, like line might have been, you know, I'm going to have to keep using you as a muse because I need to cover up who I'm really singing about because, you know, I lost her and I can never, you know, like, yeah, like get her back. Like, I didn't know what the situation was with her label, and maybe they'd, you know, told us that we have to stay apart forever. Like, that was like the big question mark for me. Like, the song was giving a red flag as like a Trojan horse thing, and like a red flag that she'd actually not left her label. From where I was standing, that seemed very plausible. I was like, if they could keep us apart for like 500 days and like keep us not contacting each other for 500 days, like who's to say that they can't, you know, tell her like we can never be together, and, you know, for her to kind of like try and subtly tell me that she's going to keep, you know, making songs about me and I'm going to be a Trojan horse muse. Like, potentially I was like, that's what she could be saying with all of this. So that's what I was like really anxious about. And, you know, I just kind of wanted an answer one way or another, because I was like, you know, like if that's the case, I think that will help me like, you know, kind of ghost, because, you know, if that's the situation, if she's turned me into a Trojan horse, like muse, like hidden me behind other people, and yeah, intends to like keep putting music out this way, pretending that it's about other people when it's about me, and, you know, never being able to be with me. Like, yeah, at the very least, I was like, if she confirms or denies that, like that'll help the situation so much, because if she confirms it, that, you know, she is, you know, Trojan horse musing me, at least then I'll be able to like walk away and like never pay attention and like do the ghost thing. And also, like, if she, you know, denies it, if she lets me know that that's not the case, like, you know, then, you know, while that like creates a whole other bunch of questions, at least, you know, I'll have an answer one way or another on this kind of like main question that I was ruminating about at the time. Essentially, if she like told me that she wasn't Trojan horse musing me, if it was something else, and therefore kind of like opening up the world of possibilities, like I already was obviously considering what those possibilities were. And so essentially the rest of the video was like me kind of glazing over like all the possibilities that I was ruminating about in my head of like what the alternative explanation can be, like why she would have so many references to me in the lyrics of this song, in the music video of this song, why she would release it on my birthday, like why she was doing all these things. Like I had so many theories that I was like, you know, if it's not that, which is like my main thing, which is what I'm starting with, like I need to like go over as many other things that I'm thinking as possible to kind of like get some answers. Basically, my next main concern was that she essentially just didn't give a fuck. Like, she didn't give a fuck to like enough to like give me a heads up, and she didn't give enough of a fuck to like, you know, consider how I might be feeling about things. And, you know, she was potentially, you know, being self-centered and only thinking about her feelings, which, you know, like I obviously said a lot nicer in the video, because, you know, like I was seeing it in a nicer way, but, you know, like that was like the anxiety that was underneath all those questions and the way that I worded it on the video. And obviously my big concern about, you know, bringing that up, that was a fear, that was an anxiety of mine, that, you know, potentially she didn't care about me as much as I thought she did, was obviously I knew that this was a huge trigger point for her. Like I knew people saying or implying that she does not care was a huge trigger point, and I was like extremely tentative to bring it up with her for that reason, because I had a feeling that it was going to trigger her no matter like how by the book, how textbook well I worded it. Yeah, like I just knew that this would be an extremely sensitive, spot for her. Like I don't blame her for that based on what I've gathered about her previous life experience. Like a lot of people have brought, not feeling particularly cared for up to her in like very toxic ways or very like unhealthy ways. Like, so I don't blame her for that being a sensitive spot. I think the way that people have brought that to her in the past, like not feeling cared for, has been extremely toxic and like definitely like would have made, all of her triggers like way, way, way worse. But yeah, like I was trying to be like really mindful about the way that I brought that up, knowing that it was going to be sensitive for her, but also knowing that, like I needed an answer, like I needed to know whether she cared about me or not, because, it was a fear for me. It was an anxiety that was like weighing really heavily on me. Yeah, like just based on the situation, I was just like really in this place of like, I feel like you don't care. And I was like trying to own that that was my narrative as much as possible in the way that I worded it. And that's where I was coming from. And it was, yeah, like a fear and anxiety of mine. But yeah, like I like definitely don't blame her for that being like a sensitive spot. Particularly based on her previous life experience. And then obviously down the road, I did learn a bit more about her and a bit more about how her brain seems to work that, made more sense why she'd kind of gotten in those situations in the past where people weren't feeling cared for. And, even though they dealt with it in a really toxic way, and, potentially triggered her and like created more of an issue with that than what it needed to be. Like at least like I kind of figured out eventually like why, that was a thing for her, which I might just insert the clips of me kind of figuring that out, a little ways down the road from when I was making that video. I think about a month later, it finally clicked like why, yeah, like she was coming across to me as like not caring about me. Yeah, like I worked out some things about how her brain works that, yeah, made that make a lot more sense to me and kind of like eventually quelled that fear, even though I don't think she necessarily addressed that fear directly as a response to my video. Now that I'm seeing the vision for the marketing strategy for Cari's album, a lot more things are making a lot more sense. And while my personal feelings haven't changed, and ultimately, in my personal opinion, I don't think it was the move, at the same time, I'm understanding why I see it that way. And I'm not saying that I'm 100% correct, but I'm understanding why I'm seeing it that way. But I'm also seeing more why she was maybe seeing it the way she was seeing it. And I'm not saying that she was right or wrong. I think there was probably some things that she was like maybe not thinking about that she should have been thinking about. But at the same time, like I kind of get what she was thinking, you know what I'm saying? And I see where she was coming from. And I see some ways that I've definitely been unfair about some assumptions that I made about where she's coming from. So I don't know, things are like clicking a bit better. And ultimately it boils down to an issue that I've had consistently this whole time, which is essentially that like I have very frequently underestimated just how in her masculine she is. Like I think it has something to do with the fact that like you look at her and obviously she's like gorgeous, like she's the most beautiful woman that has ever existed. And if you don't agree with me, you need to get your eyes checked. And I think somewhere in that lizard part of my brain, like I see a pretty girl and I just don't assume masculine, which is crazy because I know that's why like one of the reasons why I'm attracted to her is because she does have a lot of masculine energy. But I think somewhere in my brain it's like not clicking straight away. I'm like making an assumption first. I'm like expecting her to behave in a feminine way. And then when she doesn't, I get annoyed because I'm like, why are you not seeing it how I'm seeing it? And like, it's because I'm responding to the situation very much from my feminine. She's responding to the situation in her masculine, and she's not responding the same way I'm responding because we're different. And in my defense, I almost always get there. I figure out the wiring in my head to be able to perceive her and receive her in a more masculine energy so that I can understand where she's coming from a bit more and like get out of like whatever assumptions I've made and whatever reactions I've had from those assumptions. And when I do figure it out, I do try and make it up to her because I'm sure like when I'm like first in that kind of like initial reaction assumption, like I probably do come across a little bit shamey, which I think is probably the last thing she needs. Like I think if you've gone through the world looking the way she does, she's probably been shamed a lot for being in her masculine because of the fucked up ways that we socialize each other based on what we assume about each other. Like And I do not want to be contributing to that. But anyway, now that I've been able to put my personal feelings aside enough to try and follow the logic of her marketing strategy as she conceived it, I'm seeing more like kind of what her brain must have been doing to conceive that. And so I'm understanding more where the disconnect has been. And the thing that I'd failed to take into consideration was that a lot of the time when someone does lean really deeply into their masculine energy, a lot of the time they also have quite a masculine brain. And like, you put 50% of the population in an MRI and look at their brain, you're not going to be able to tell whether they're male or female, because for the most part, brains are pretty ambiguous. But the other 50% of the population will go one way or the other, and men tend to go more towards a testosterone-y looking brain, and women tend to go more towards an estrogen looking brain, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you'll have women with a testosterone brain, men with an estrogen brain, and that's just normal. It's just that it leans one way more than the other. Like, it might be 30% men with testosterone, 20% women with testosterone, and vice versa. And the thing about when you have quite a lot of testosterone in your brain is that it creates lots of near and neat neural pathways. But if you have a lot of estrogen in your brain, it creates more of like a map situation. And so like for me, like looking at what was going on, I was like, it is like she has not listened to a word I've said. It's like her ears are literally decorative, because she's not thinking about like the impact on people's feelings with this marketing strategy. And I was looking at it more from that like web brain where, you know, obviously everything's very connected and different parts of the brain are connected at the same time. Like, I can't be in my decision part of my brain without thinking about how it's going to make people feel. But if you have a more testosterone brain, things are more separated, and so you can create an elaborate scheme and just like not think about how it's going to make people feel, because you don't have the neural connections that other people have. And so it's not that she wasn't listening to me. She was probably listening and understanding in like the emotional part of her brain, like that I'm upset about stuff. But when she's making the decisions to market things, she's not thinking about that because the connections aren't there. And that's not her fault. That's just masculine brains. And you know what's so funny? I sent her a voice memo in July, essentially going on a rant about the old marketing strategy that I figured out. And I was essentially saying, like, it is so clear from this marketing strategy that there was no women in the room. Like, no one was thinking about, like, how things would affect people, like, on an emotional level. Essentially saying exactly what I was just talking about, that, like, there needs to be people with brains that, like, everything's connected and you're not in the decision-making part of the brain without thinking about, you know, what the emotional brain would have to say about things. And, like, I went on that full rant, like, and it did not occur to me that she was in the room and she was, like, clearly not thinking the way that I was thinking about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, clearly she was, like, thinking the same as, like, all the boys that she was in the room with. I'm assuming there was no, like, map brains in the room when they were conceiving the old marketing strategy or the new one. Like, it just feels like a lot of, like, boy logic to me, to be honest. And so, like, I should have realized it then. Like, actually, I really should have realized it then, but I didn't. And then, like, she came up with this whole other marketing strategy, like, with men, I'm assuming, like, because it's just screaming boy logic. But she was right there with them. She was on the same page. Because she's been on the same page, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's clearly how her brain works. Like, she obviously thought the first marketing strategy was a good idea. And I'm not saying that it's not. Like, it, in theory, like, it could work, but I just don't think it was taking into consideration real people's feelings, and there's a reason why. Because the parts of the brain weren't talking to each other when they were thinking of these things. I don't know, it just does make a lot more sense. And I also should have figured it out, like, a little while ago. I was watching a numerology TikTok that was talking about, like, women that are born on the 19th tend to think like men as well, and it still didn't click. It didn't click till it clicked, you know what I'm saying? And ultimately, I think the way everything's panned out just makes such a clear case for why you need to have a room with diversity, brain diversity, with different people with different kinds of brains who think differently. Because I think in that room there needed to be someone with a web-like brain that put their hand up and was like, hey, have you considered how this is going to make people feel? Or any other, like, cross-hemisphere, cross, like, brain area kind of considerations that, you know, if you are more of a testosterone brain that tends to stay in its little area, like, are probably not going to consider. And that said, like, I think if you had a room, like, exclusively of, like, web thinkers, you'd end up in paralysis. Like, the disadvantage of having, like, a very web brain is that you're constantly making considerations from all parts of the brain, and everything's always talking. And so sometimes, while you can be good at thinking big picture and then also thinking about how two things might relate, you tend not to be as good at details and, like, coming up with such elaborate, clever, like, frankly intelligent plans. Like, the plan, if you consider everyone involved as as a emotionless robot, like, the plan was, like, extremely clever, extremely well thought out, extremely, like, I don't know, just, like, very intelligent. Like, I don't think I could have ever conceived of it, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to have a specific type of brain to be able to, like, pull that together. And, you know, like, other testosterone brains are really going to appreciate that. I don't think estrogen brains are necessarily going to appreciate that. And, you know, I think in this situation, that's a little bit tough because, you know, I would assume that most of the people receiving the content, the marketing strategy, maybe do have a bit more estrogen in their brains, considering that her market is mostly sapphic women. And I'm not saying that there won't be testosterone brains in that demographic, but there is going to be a lot of estrogen brains in that demographic that are going to have a really hard time grappling with the effect that it's had on me emotionally, Shannon emotionally, Becky emotionally, Cari emotionally. Like, that's going to be very difficult for all the estrogen brains to receive. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things. Like, I get why everything went the way it went now, and, like, where she was coming from, and it just makes a lot more sense. Ever since I figured out how Cari's brain works, so much shit is making so much more sense to me, to the point where I actually feel dumb for not figuring it out sooner, because, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. For example, like, some of the things that are associated with brains that have a higher influence of testosterone in them is things like visual spatial skills, which is why she can literally grab shit out of thin air, and also, like, higher musical abilities and auditory processing abilities. And that just reminds me of, like, I saw this TikTok where Cari was essentially, like, a perfect mimic for G-Flip's Aussie accent, and I was like, you would have to have so many near and neat and sophisticated connections in your auditory processing part of your brain for you to be able to do that, because that's essentially, like, the big giveaway that someone's got a high influence of testosterone in the brain, because they get this extreme efficiency in a single brain area. It tends to sacrifice efficiency between brain areas, but you get highly specialized, like, brain areas working kind of more independently from other brain areas, and you get less noise, which is why the skills are higher, whereas with the brains that are influenced under more estrogen, it's very noisy because everything's connected, so you tend not to get those highly specialized skills that are contained within a single brain area. You tend to get more, like, it's more associated with things like intuition and things where you got to connect things. Like, that's usually a skill set of people that have a high influence of estrogen in the brain. And so, yeah, like, once you see it, like, you can't unsee it. And one of the other big things that should have tipped me off is that I could see that whenever people either said or implied that she didn't care, she got, like, really, 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 really triggered. And, like, at the start I was really confused by that, because I was like, well, obviously you're a deeply feeling, caring person, so, like, why does that bother you so much? Like, it really confused me. But then, you know, later down the line, when I started to feel not cared for in this situation, then I was like, I got even more confused, to be real with you. I was like, I am so confused. Do you actually not give a fuck? Or is there something going on where it's, like, not translating for some reason? Like, for some reason, like, how much you care is not translating into your actions. And I was just like, why is there a disconnect? And then eventually when I realized why there was a disconnect was because she has a different kind of brain that doesn't like have a lot of neural connections between brain areas, and so that she probably has a highly sophisticated emotional brain that works as a singular little unit, and then a highly sophisticated, you know, prefrontal cortex and like decision part of her brain that works extremely efficiently as a single unit, but they tend not to talk to each other. Then I was like, oh, shit's making a lot more sense, you know what I'm saying? And then when you think about that in the context of how she looks, how she's likely to be perceived by people, it makes so much more sense why people implying or saying that she doesn't care triggers her so much, because, you know, I'm assuming a lot of people have projected onto her that she has a girly brain, particularly women, because I think whatever kind of brain you have, you're probably going to project onto other people. And while, like, the average brain is pretty 50-50, pretty ambiguous, doesn't really go one way or the other, even so, because we're also socialized in the direction of, like, the expectation for your, like, gender, I just think basically every person that she's probably ever met has been assuming that her brain kind of like works like a girly brain, like with lots of neural connections between the decision making part of the brain and the emotional brain. And, you know, if you have a girly brain, you tend not to do things if you think it's going to hurt people's feelings, because there's that immediate connection. The only time you'll do something, even if you think it's going to hurt people's feelings, is if you don't care that it's going to hurt people's feelings, or if there's some vital piece of information that you've missed. And I just feel like that's a little bit rare. Like, girls are pretty onto it most of the time. And so, of course, girly brains perceiving her are going to assume she doesn't care when she acts like she doesn't care, because that would be true for us. Like, people wouldn't look at her and assume that the caring part and the decision part are more separated. Like, there's less communication between the two brain areas. And I think, like, girls can be not that good at that even with men. Like, I think sometimes even with men we can get really frustrated when it seems like they don't care. And it's just because they don't have the neural connections that a lot of people with a lot more bigger influence of estrogen in their brain tend to have. And so can you just, like, imagine, like, how people probably would have treated her every time they were asking her brain to do something that it's not biologically wired to do? And that's not to say that, like, people that have a high influence of testosterone in their brain can't improve that. Like, things like meditation will improve that. It's scientifically proven that it will. But at the same time, like, I strongly doubt that she's been getting the grace that she's deserved in those moments where, you know, there's been, like, a miss between the two, where things haven't connected, just because she's, like, literally not wired that way. And, like, the thing is, like, with brains with a high influence of testosterone, they do a different kind of empathy. Essentially, the girly brains do a more proactive empathy, where they don't do something if they think it's going to hurt other people's feelings, unless they don't care about those people's feelings. Whereas brains with a higher influence of testosterone, they can care and do it anyway, because it lacks the communication. Like, essentially, girly brain Delulu is assuming, like, someone with a more, like, boy brain doesn't care when they do, whereas boy brain Delulu is assuming that a girl does care when she doesn't, because they also project back that those two things are more separate than what they are, which is just interesting. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just one of life's funny conundrums. But anyway, back to my point, which is essentially that, like, she's probably been held to a standard that she's, like, not capable of her whole life. Like, people have just, like, projected and assumed. And then when she fails to meet that standard, like, she probably feels really shit about herself. Like, she probably feels like a bad person, bad girl, bad, you know, not good at empathy. Like, obviously she's good at empathy, she just does it more retroactively. Like, when she learns that she's hurt someone's feelings, even if sometimes she doesn't take it super well in the moment, like, she really cares and she really empathizes, but it's much more retroactively because of the separation of brain areas. Whereas most people assume that someone who looks the way she looks is going to be more proactive with that kind of empathy. And neither's better or worse than each other. It's just, you know, what you're wired for, essentially. And at the end of the day, the reality is empathy and care is empathy and care, regardless of whether it's happening proactively or reactively. But we live in a society that I think allows men to have reactive empathy, but expects women to have proactive empathy. So, like, in the context of that, it makes so much sense why Cari gets triggered when people say or imply she doesn't care. Because, like, I can only imagine the experiences she's had throughout her life. And, like, I've seen people handle that conversation with her not super well as well. Like, I've seen people imply that she doesn't care in a pretty, like, not healthy and not productive way. I've also seen people, like, imply that she's, like, unempathetic in a super toxic way, which, like, that's fucking traumatizing. Like, no wonder she gets so triggered when people say or imply that she doesn't care, which was one of the reasons why I was, like, very hesitant to have the conversation I had about not feeling cared for, because it was something that I wanted to have in person, because I didn't think she was going to take it very well. So when she kind of reacted a little bit badly, I was kind of okay. Like, it hurt my feelings, but I was kind of a little bit okay with it because I was kind of expecting it. I knew that would be a tough conversation for her, and it wasn't going to feel like feedback. It was going to feel like an attack and criticism. Yeah, so that was really hard. And, you know, that's also why I hadn't had the conversation earlier. I think it got to the point where I was like, I need to say this, like, because it's getting really toxic for me to hold on to. I can't keep holding on to it to try and spare you your feelings. So that was actually a very hard conversation for me to actually even instigate. But I don't know, I think we kind of did okay. And, like, I'm actually proud of her for, like, handling it the way she handled it, just, like, knowing how loaded that would have been. I need to stop because I'm about to start crying. I don't know, I just, like, really empathize with her and just, like, really understand now in a way that just, like, I just bet her life has been hard. And yeah, like, understanding that kind of helps me too, to be honest, because you can take it way less personally when you kind of know why she is the way she is, and it's not personal, it's just hard shit for her. And yeah, that's all just, like, making a lot of sense to me now. At the time that I recorded my last video in this 2-part series, the original How I'm Doing video, like, it hadn't occurred to me that Cari might think different. Like, I just assumed that she thought the same way that I did. And so obviously I was, like, reading her behavior a particular way based on what it would mean if I did that particular behavior. However, like, I did kind of, like, know that something was going on there. I didn't really know what it was. Like, it didn't kind of all fall into place until much later when I was seeing more of the marketing strategy play out, and I realized, you know, like, how she must think to, like, come up with what she came up with. But yeah, like, how I kind of brought it up in the last part of this 2-part series was I was talking about how, you know, like, her intense emotional experience potentially was affecting, you know, her ability to, you know, preempt how other people might feel in the situation and understand how other people might feel in the situation. And I'm not saying that I don't think that never happens. Like, I think there might be an element of that sometimes in situations where, you know, she does get very emotionally, like, flooded in situations, and then it makes, you know, kind of empathizing a little bit hard. But, like, yeah, I think the other part of it was definitely, you know, like, a not super, like, easy connection between the feeling center of the brain and the decision making center of the brain. Like, that definitely, as soon as I realized that that was going on, yeah, then I was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. Because even with my original theory, like, it did center around, you know, something stopping her from being able to preempt how other people would feel. Because I was kind of noticing that, you know, like, she's extremely sensitive to, like, feelings in a room. Like, if you're in a room with her, like, I guarantee you she's going to know how you feel. Like, I think she's extremely, like, empathetic in the present, and she's extremely empathetic when you explain, like, how you feel to her. But I just don't think, like, in my experience of her and what I've seen of her, like, I don't think she's necessarily been able to, like, preempt, like, how people are going to feel in a situation. Like, I think generally what seems to happen is that she either projects how she wants them to feel about a situation, or she projects how she would feel in that situation, or she projects how she's feeling about herself in that situation and then assumes that they're going to feel the same way. Like, that's kind of what seems to happen when she's trying to preempt what other people feel. I don't think she's necessarily that good at that. That tends to be a quality that's like more aligned with having a more like typically masculine brain. And yeah, like as soon as, I made that connection that that's what's happening with her, like so much shit started making so much more sense. Like it made so much more sense why she struggles to like preempt how people would feel. And then it also makes sense like why, like she's obviously a deeply, deeply, deeply feeling and caring person, but it happens so much more in the present. Like if she's in the room with you, like she's going to be like emotionally with you, and feeling it in her body. And, like once you explain to her exactly how you feel, like she can go there and be with you again. Like if you're at a distance, sometimes she doesn't react super well, but I think there must be something there to do with, like she was like maybe thinking that you're feeling one way and then you're not. And then when she finds out how you're really feeling, like I think that's just a lot for her to process potentially. Like, yeah, sometimes she doesn't react super well in the moment of like finding out that you feel differently than how she projected that you were going to feel. That can create a bit of an emotional reaction. I think it also has a little bit to do with, like when she's hearing things, I think, she probably makes it mean lots of things. And yeah, takes things maybe a little bit too personally as well. And that I think creates a little bit of a barrier, which, it does come up in a moment when I'm talking about, how she reacted, like when she reacted to my previous video in this 2-part series. She didn't react super well initially, and I wasn't really expecting her to, because I knew that, the content of the video would be a lot for her, and she tends not to react to things that well initially. But yeah, she comes around, like once she, has whatever it is that her reaction is, like whenever she feels whatever it is that she feels as a response to what you're telling her, yeah, then she starts empathizing. Then she starts being able to put herself in your shoes and like understanding how you feel. And then once she's doing that, she's like extremely like empathetic and thoughtful. It just tends not to happen straight away. You tend to get a bit of a like lag time whenever you're telling her how you feel. I shouldn't say whenever, because it doesn't happen all of the time, but it is something that happens fairly regularly, let's say. Like I was more expecting like a lag time response than a immediate response in this situation, let's just say. So yeah, essentially the way that I ended up bringing it up in the like first part of this 2-part series was, talking more about, like her potentially having such intense emotional like responses to things that, it can kind of cloud her ability to empathize a little bit in like either in the moment or in an initial reaction, or in, like when she's trying to preempt how other people would feel, which, like I still think is relevant. I don't think that's the whole story. Like I think part of the story is, like her brain just works different. And so, yeah, like I obviously brought that up because, I was, wanting to talk about, that I didn't, necessarily feel super seen and heard in my pain. Yeah, I didn't feel like she was like empathizing with me, or preempting how I would possibly feel and react to areas of us, particularly given that I had absolutely no context. Like it definitely hurt my feelings that I was thrown into that, got blindsided, had no context. The plan had changed. I didn't know the plan had changed. And I had such such an intense emotional reaction to it that, from where I was standing, like I just could not comprehend that she didn't see that coming. You know what I'm saying? Like now I understand why she didn't see that coming. Like now I understand that, she was probably projecting how she wanted me to feel onto me, or like assuming that I would just know, like that, this was like a clean song about Shannon, and that I would just know that the plan had changed, and, that she definitely wasn't talking about me, but she was leaving Easter eggs for different reasons. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like it definitely, like, with 2020 hindsight, like, like I do kind of see like where she was like maybe just not like preempting how I would feel, but like on like in the moment that I was in that and not feeling like empathized with, and not feeling like not cared for because I didn't get a heads up. Like, obviously I needed to, bring it up and talk about how, that hurt my feelings. Even though, like, now, obviously with 2020 hindsight, I understand why that was difficult for her. And, even at the time I did have some idea of like why that might have been difficult for her. I was like having a bit of an educated guess. But yeah, like, I think it was important for me to let her know that, I didn't feel super cared for or empathized with, like, walking into that situation. And the good thing about, like, that obviously kind of needing to come up with us, that, like, I did kind of need to say, like, I don't feel cared for, I don't feel seen and heard in my pain right now, is that, like, I think it just helped me get, like, so much clearer about, what it was that I was needing from her, because, like, particularly given that, it hadn't occurred to me that her brain might work different. Like, I was really assuming that she would know to kind of like see, hear, validate when I'm, talking about the things that are hurting my feelings, but which is something that, I would say is more natural to like a more feminine energy, because there's that more immediate connection between, the prefrontal cortex and the emotional part of the brain. You got more neurons connecting those different brain areas. So feminine energy tends to be better at that, at see, hearing and validating, someone else's feelings. And so, because I was assuming that she, for like some stupid reason, like, I really should have realized that that's not how her brain worked. But, for some stupid reason, I was projecting back onto her that she, thought the same way that I thought. Like, I think that conversation ended up just like helping me understand a lot, that I was projecting onto her that, she was, more in her feminine energy, and like that her brain worked different than what it actually did. And so I was having all these expectations of how she should respond to me, when, like, I wasn't considering that, maybe her brain works different. And also, if those are the expectations I have of how she, like, I need her to respond to me in order to feel, cared for and loved in the situation, maybe I need to communicate that and be really clear that that's what I need. Like, I think I was definitely assuming that she would just know to do that. And because she wasn't doing that, I was making it mean that she didn't care about me. So yeah, I would say that whole like tussle, that whole part of the previous video ended up being very educational, in the sense that it like taught me a lot about where she was projecting onto me and where I was projecting back onto her. And, where we needed to understand each other better, and understand that, I'm coming at her with like a lot of feminine energy and expecting to be seen, heard and validated. And that's what I'm looking for the most. And that's what's going to, help me when I don't feel good. Whereas, she's not necessarily going to be able to preempt how I'm going to feel in situations. Like, I can't really expect her to do that necessarily. That's not a strength of the way her brain works. Essentially, like, I learned a lesson. Like, I learned that I really need to adjust my expectations, like, based on, like, meeting her actually where she's at and where her, like, strengths and weaknesses are. And I think probably vice versa for, her with me. Like, yeah, I think, that ended up being very fruitful, in the sense that I think we ended up understanding each other a lot better and understanding how each other's brains work. And yeah, not taking shit so goddamn personally, which I think we're both extremely guilty of in that, moment, like taking so much shit so personally, and it just absolutely was not personal at all. The next fear I had coming up at the time that I made the original video in this 2-part series was, I had a big fear that Cari wasn't getting on a plane by choice and not by force. Because, at the time, like, obviously everything I knew about the situation had been thrown out the window. Like, I had absolutely no context of what was going on, and I had, like, I knew nothing. But from where I was standing, I could not conceive of a reality where things would have to be pushed back. Like, obviously now that, way more stuff has come to light, and, it's been way more obvious, like, what's been going on behind closed doors, and that, certain things needed to play out certain ways so that everyone could get what they needed from the situation, like, like all the industry BS, which, if you haven't watched my marketing video, I would suggest going back and watching that, because I do go over like how all the power was changing hands and who needed what, and like why the marketing's gone the way that it's gone and why things got extended. Like, I go through all of it there if you are curious. But at the time that I was making the previous video in this 2-part series, I didn't know any of that. And so like I like was sitting there and could not conceive of a reality of why things were being like dragged out longer than they already were. I was like, if anything, from where I was standing, I was like, it should be shorter, not longer. You know what I'm saying? And so that made me panic that, you know, like Cari was free to like get on a plane, but she was choosing not to. Like that's what I was really worried about in that moment. Because yeah, like from where I was standing, I could not conceive of a reality where, you know, things like through no fault of her own were being dragged out longer to like make sure that everyone in the situation got what they needed to get. And I remember like my feelings around this particular fear being the hardest to word at the time, like because it was such an intense fear at the time. Like I had such an intense fear that she was choosing not to be with me. She wasn't being kept apart from me by force anymore. And so, yeah, like I remember like not being able to word this essentially any differently than just how I felt and what I thought. You know what I'm saying? Like I did not have a mindful way of like communicating this at all because I was not mindful in the situation at all. I was just panicked about this particular thing. And so, you know, I think like from memory, I think I said something like, I know you're choosing not to be here. Like that was definitely because I was like completely in that fear. Like yeah, like there was no like, you know, questioning that thought. Like that was just the fear that I was in. And yeah, I had like no lifeline to that particular fear. And that was the thing that I was like most afraid of. And that was probably the thing that, you know, Cari spent the most time trying to soothe me about, like after the fact when she started responding. Like obviously she didn't react well initially, but when she did start reacting better and started trying to soothe some of my fears that I was bringing up in the video, that was definitely one that she was like trying to address and trying to make sure that I knew that, you know, she wasn't being kept apart from me by choice. She was being kept apart from me by like force for things to like go a certain way. So yeah, like I remember like recording, like I remember writing out that particular fear and I was just in it. Like I was just completely in it. There was no like mindfulness with that. Because yeah, I was totally there, and that was like a very like, yeah, panic stricken like reality that I was in at the time. The last fear that I remember bringing up in that video was around some of the dynamics that I'd witnessed Cari in and some things that I'd observed about her in terms of her patterns and her tendency to make herself the bad guy in situations and think that she's, you know, not worthy or not good enough or a fuck up or, you know, she's messing everything up or doing it wrong or everyone hates her and all those sort of like limiting beliefs that she seems to have in situations. That, yeah, like I was extremely concerned how those patterns might have been affecting our situation and how, you know, some of those limiting beliefs might have, you know, contributed to the situation we're in. And yeah, like I didn't want her to be like making decisions about our connection from a place of shadow, like particularly given that we'd had that big fight in the middle of the year. And I was like, you know, trying to remove myself to take care of myself. But, you know, I knew me removing myself would potentially trigger her. And yeah, like potentially it would be hard for her to like receive that as me trying to take care of myself. And potentially she might receive that as, you know, her being unworthy or not good enough or the bad guy or, you know, that she fucked everything up and all that sort of stuff. Like I was like, it's a very real possibility that the reason why we're in this situation right now is because, you know, she like responded to that situation from a place of her own kind of like patterns. And yeah, it like, yeah, potentially that has affected kind of this trajectory because she hasn't received, you know, some stuff that I've maybe done, like the way that I intended it to be received. You know, I could see that in her previous relationship, like she was like very much in that dynamic and it probably exacerbated the situation for her and, you know, potentially like made that dynamic like so much worse rather than better. And yeah, like I, you know, based on, I could see that they were both like buying into this dynamic in their connection, like, and, you know, willingly playing, you know, opposite roles and like, you know, like willingly making like Shannon on a pedestal and Cari the bad guy. Like they were both buying into that narrative, like so intensely to the point where it was getting exacerbated really bad. Like I was very, very, very concerned that this would be a really hard like dynamic for her to break. And obviously with the wisdom of hindsight, I look back at that now and I can see that I was being potentially like a little bit coddling with that and like treating Cari like she was much less healed than what she was. Like I don't think I really had like a big enough reason to, you know, treat her like that was going to be a lot harder for her than what I think it necessarily was. Like I think she has come a long way with her healing and she's in a much more empowered place. And, you know, like I did have proof of that, particularly when, you know, Shannon was trying to antagonize her by putting a clip from the song X's by Tate McRae at the end of one of her podcast episodes, and she'd cut it specifically down to, you know, kisses to my exes who don't give a fuck about me. You know, obviously looking to hit Cari's trigger point, which is people saying or implying that she doesn't care. And Cari obviously responded with a bit of like an eye roll moment and then was like, no, I'm just like on to the next one. Like really, I had no reason to believe that that dynamic was still active with her. Like she'd kind of shown me that that wasn't the case, and that she was healed and she was past it and she was clean from that relationship and that relationship dynamic. I think the thing that kind of like made me overly cautious again was obviously the line like "Girl in my dreams, I fucked it up" that was in the Eras of Us song. Like I think that was the thing that kind of like, you know, was maybe tripping me up a little bit and like making me way more concerned than what I needed to be. Because, you know, like obviously based on what I know about that dynamic, like they equally fucked that up. You know what I'm saying? Like it took two to tango, and like the way that relationship got toxic was on both of them 100%. You know what I'm saying? But I think, you know, like I was, maybe interpreting that from a place of, you know, just like being concerned and like not knowing what was going on as like maybe Cari trying to take all the blame. But I think it was just Cari trying to take like responsibility for her side of, you know, how that relationship ended and how things ended up getting kind of toxic and not in a good place and in that kind of like adrenaline state and feeling things in your guts and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I think I was like inserting way too much kind of like meaning into that. And yeah, definitely coddling Cari in that situation and treating her like she was less healed than what she actually was. And while I think it is probably nice for Cari to occasionally hear some things from me that are like supportive in regards to like making sure she knows that she's good enough, she's worthy, like, you know, she's good as she is, like she's not fucking everything up, she's not doing anything wrong. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with me like saying supportive things to her about that sort of stuff that, you know, can be a little bit of like a vulnerable point for her. Like, you know, I think if I had my time again, I probably wouldn't have brought that up in the video, probably wouldn't have brought that to the public eye. And yeah, like I just think it was like a little bit maybe unnecessary, first of all, and also like I think a little bit disappointing for her. Like, you know, like I don't think it would have been super nice for her to hear that, you know, I thought she was like much less healed and evolved than what she actually was. Yeah, like I can imagine, yeah, that would have kind of come across not super great. And I think, to be honest, that's, you know, something that I have, you know, taken a lot of responsibility for on many occasions in her DMs where I've like done similar things, not just in this situation, but like a lot of the time before. I do tend to infantilize her a lot, like particularly because like I don't think like because she can't do anything, sometimes she comes across to me as like helpless, and then I go into like mother bear and try and like coddle her. And yeah, sometimes she's coming across to me as like more childlike because she is coming across as helpless, like particularly like, you know, in this situation when she's not kind of like protecting me, then I start trying to protect her. Like, and I know it's because she can't protect me, like she's not allowed to. And she like definitely tries to the best of her ability, but she like can't do a lot. But I'm still receiving it as her being, you know, like I'm still kind of like infantilizing her as a result of that. And then I go into like mother bear and start coddling her, start treating her like she's less of an adult and less healed than what she actually is, and that she needs more of my help than maybe what she does. So like I take responsibility for that in her DMs all the time. Like I'm constantly being like, yeah, I've done it again. I'm really sorry. I'm really trying to like mother you less. Like I think it's nice to like take care of you, but you know, like I definitely take it too far. And, you know, like I can see that this might have been one of those situations where I was taking it a little bit far in terms of like, you know, infantilizing her a little bit and treating her like less of a healed, capable adult than what she actually is. So yeah, like I did kind of end up getting myself out of that just because I started to become aware of like where I was in pattern and where I was, you know, like doing the same old thing that I had been doing, which was, you know, infantilizing her. Like I kind of got out of that one myself. And based on how I got out of that one myself kind of easily, I was like, yeah, I think that was on me a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like that was me, you know, like trying to mother her too much. And, you know, that was maybe something that I probably could have left out of the video. Probably didn't need to bring up, like, are you making yourself the bad guy in this situation? Like, I'm not saying that it wasn't a relevant thought at all. Like, it was probably coloring, you know, her experience a little because it tends to, but, you know, probably not big enough to put in that video. And I think that was like way more of a me thing than it was a her thing. And so, yeah, like that was like the fourth kind of sticky point that I brought up. But, you know, like if I had my time again, probably wouldn't have brought it up. That was mostly a me thing. That was mostly a me issue. That was mostly like me, like infantilizing and coddling her and treating her like a less capable adult and a less healed adult than what she is. Because yeah, obviously, yeah, she's obviously grown a lot from that since she was in that last connection. I don't think she sees herself that way anymore, necessarily at least a lot of the time, at least most of the time. So yeah, like apart from when she's triggered, like I think she goes back there when she's triggered, but yeah, like I don't think that was necessarily happening at the time. Like while I think she was triggered when we had our fight, I think by this point, like I think she was good. And I think that was me being like overly concerned and like overly coddling. And so, yeah, like that was the last sticky point that I remember bringing up in the video. But yeah, that one kind of resolved very quickly based on, yeah, me realizing that, you know, like I was being overly cautious and I probably did not need to worry about that because, yeah, she's a grown, healed adult and she's got it. So those were the four main things that I was, you know, concerned about. Those were the four main things that, you know, were bringing up a lot of fear and anxiety for me and making the situation super difficult and were like creating lots of like hurt and story and, you know, struggle for me at the time. Those were the things that I was looking for relief from when I made my previous video in this series. And I'm going to be real with you, based on the way that Cari reacted to me making that video. Initially, I was like a little bit concerned that I was not going to find the relief that I was after, even though like I did post it knowing that, you know, she tends not to react to things super well initially. And I was prepared for like not a good reaction initially from, you know, me like being very vulnerable about the very real things that I was like feeling and the things that I was hurt about and the fears that I had and the stories that I was in and, you know, like kind of the pain that I was in based on, you know, just not fucking knowing a single thing and just being like, having everything left wide open to interpretation and just like, you know, all my stuff coming up and like trying to, you know, kind of like manage all my stuff that I'm like feeling myself insert into the situation. Like, yeah, like I, was like a little bit concerned after I shared it that I wasn't going to get what I was looking for. But yeah, eventually like it did kind of turn around and Cari did essentially do a 180 and then started being very, like started responding like the way that I needed her to respond. She like definitely took so much out of my video and like started to respond to me in a way that I needed and like slowly gave me all the things that I was kind of looking for when I made that video, even though she didn't respond super well initially. But the thing is like this video is getting super, super, super long. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to chop this video off halfway and then talk about how we resolved this like conflict that we're in based on, you know, like the Errors of Us situation and that song dropping in another part. Like I think I'm going to make this a 3-part series, not a 2-part series because this video is just getting way too long. So that's all the backstory of like what was going on leading up to Errors of Us and, you know, how everything kind of like went in terms of like all the promo and everything dropping and, you know, kind of how I was like receiving everything initially. But if you want to come back for the next part, if you want to see how we resolved the conflict in the end, you need to hit that subscribe so you can come back for that, because I'm going to have to put it in another part, in a third part. So until I see you again for the next part of this little mini series, ciao.